And tweet is out.
Brilliant. Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear us and see us. We'll be starting momentarily. Hopefully everyone is doing well. Episode 303. I like that number.
Let me mute this. Turn this down. Make sure.
Happy Friday.
It is Friday, thankfully. Get that. Get the notes up. All right, I think. Well, let me get the read. Where is that? Too many tabs. Way too many tabs. Jeez.
Got lots to talk about today. So, well, actually, maybe not. We'll see how long it takes us.
Oh, there we go. Podcast brief. Wow, I have way too many tabs open.
How much RAM does your browser take up normally?
Let's see. Task Manager. I'm using 60% of my memory. Edge is using about 2 gigabytes.
Oh, is that it? I thought it'd be way
No,
more.
almost 3 gigabytes.
Mine's 1200 megabytes. So 1.2 gig.
Mine's 2,500. 2,500. I have 117 tabs open.
That's crazy. What are you doing?
Well, some of those are PWA, Twitter,
Sure.
and Slack,
Yeah,
I think.
Sure.
But yeah, listen, I'm a wild person. All right, I am now recording.
I'm now recording.
Fix the camera there. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 303 for March 10th, 2023. Wow, a lot of threes in that. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast with Dana Rubino, myself, and Zach Bowden. We'll be covering everything that's happened this week with Microsoft, Windows, Xbox, and more. This week we've got a busy schedule here, including a new Windows Canary channel for the insiders, which is kind of interesting. We'll explain what that means, what's happened with Dev Channel, what we can expect with Canary, and more. Of course, we'll give an update on Bing Chat because, well, they're updating it every week. So, there's been new stuff that's happened, and they've hit some milestones, which is nice. Surface Laptop Studio 2 leak. This actually isn't really new. It happened a couple of weeks ago. We just haven't talked about it, so we'll put it to some context and what we mean by it, what we can expect, and maybe even when we can expect it. Intel just smashed a benchmarking record, beating up AMD. We'll talk about that. That's not a huge story, although it's kind of an interesting story, I think, as well, because processors, they keep improving. A new Microsoft AI event was announced because AI is the new normal, in case you haven't noticed. And Sony shows its true colors. Yes, this is the ongoing thing with Activision Blizzard and Microsoft trying to buy them and Sony being a bunch of jerks. And it's not even us. I mean, they basically came out and said what their true intentions are here. So we'll go through all that and more. Zach, how you doing on this fine Friday?
I am not too bad. We should also mention this week we are sponsored by Magic Mind and Indeed, so we'll be hearing more about those later in the show. We have to remember to start mentioning that at the top of the show because we sometimes forget and it's not good.
So be it. Yes, we do have more and more sponsors because we're just getting so popular on our podcast.
It is,
so,
true.
Yeah. I also hear you guys are getting the snow I had last week because that's how weather works, apparently.
Yeah, it snowed 1 or 2 days this week. It didn't set, sadly, so there was no snow day for us. It was just snowing. Yeah, it's been really cold this week. Colder than previous weeks, which is really annoying. But yeah. How are you?
Hanging in there. It's interesting. It's been kind of technically a slow week, although for site traffic, we've done exceptionally well considering, mostly because we have a lot of good editorials up. Our current team of writers are some of the best I've ever seen, and they have some really interesting takes. Of course, Jez Corden, our games editor, has been writing all sorts of interesting pieces. He has one up right now on the site that basically full mea culpa. He says, listen, this is something that Sony got absolutely right with the PlayStation 5 that Microsoft got wrong with the Xbox Series X and S. And, I think it's a really good piece. It talks about the storage controversy, which was, something people had discussed early on. Basically, long story short, Microsoft uses a semi-proprietary technology called compact flash. It's semi-proprietary because my camera uses compact flash, but they have it's a special adapter. The benefit to Microsoft, of course, is convenience. It's literally a thing you just plug into the device, and that's it. You get instant memory, and it's parallel to what the internal storage is going to be like. So that's cool. Sony went the more classic route, which is just uses the NVMe M.2 storage, which is basically the same thing that did in the laptop. And so you can just take that memory and put it into the PlayStation. The difference is you got to crack open the PlayStation. Okay, so that's a screwdriver. It's a little bit of work, just like updating a laptop is. For people who don't like opening electronics, I kind of get the hesitation. The first time you open one, you're like, oh my God, am I going to screw it up? But it's really not that big of a deal. The difference is, though, the prices for storage, for the M2 storage, have really, really come down, especially from the height of the pandemic. And it's literally half the price of what you would have to buy through. So Microsoft storage solution is basically a proprietary design. And so you can only get the official versions of it, basically. So because of that, it's just way more expensive. So Sony wins out because they're not losing anything in performance, and it's easier. Well, it's more affordable to do a massive upgrade. So it's an interesting take if you want to go read that. And we have a couple other nice editorials up on Windows Central as well. But let's get into, I guess, this week's news here with Microsoft announced changes to the Windows Insider channel. And specifically, they're adding a Canary channel to it, which is now reflective of the Microsoft Edge developments. So, it's not that unusual. We've all heard the term Canary. Google started using it years ago with its Chrome browser. But Zach, why don't you walk us through what this Canary channel is, what I guess is in between the lines of what Microsoft officially announced and what we actually think is going on, and what's going on with the dev channel that people probably should know about and it's probably too late to do anything about.
Yeah, so the announcement of the new Canary channel is kind of interesting because, as is the case with most Microsoft announcements, it's very vague in its reasoning for existing. They say that it's about long lead development time for things like platform changes, including Windows kernel changes, new APIs, etc. The point of this new channel is it's supposed to be a place where Microsoft can flight less stable code working towards the next version of the Windows platform. Now, those words, the next version of Windows, is a key factor here. This is very essentially, everyone sort of started calling it Windows 12. We don't know if it will be called Windows 12. We can say Windows 12 in spirit, but we don't know if it will be another Windows 11 major update or new version of Windows entirely. But the next major version of the Windows platform is expected sometime in 2024. We've talked about this before. And so what the Canary channel is testing really, although Microsoft doesn't say this outright, is platform work for that next major version of Windows. And so to start testing all that stuff, they've had to move around the insiders in the dev channel, move them down to an earlier range of builds so that they can keep testing Windows 11 moments and 23H2. And then the Canary channel is where they will now begin testing code for the next major version of Windows. So yeah, it's essentially them. They haven't announced Windows 12. They've not announced that the next version of Windows is coming. But any work that they are doing for that release, because they are obviously going to do a next version of Windows at some point, is being tested in the Canary channel as of this week. So that's very exciting, though there really isn't anything exciting in the builds yet. This is certainly going to become more interesting as the year progresses. But as of right now, they're more or less exactly the same as the dev channel. Now, the dev channel itself was affected by this change as well. In addition to the new Canary channel, which is remaining at the 25,000 build range. So, last week the dev channel was receiving build 25309. This week the Canary channel received build 25314. So it's a progression of the 25,000 range. But the dev channel has now moved down to a new 23,000 range. So this is Microsoft testing new features being developed on top of the current in-market version of Windows, that being Windows 11 22H2. This falls right in line with what we've been hearing about Moments engineering, where Microsoft will only really ship a new version of the Windows platform every 3 years now. So it doesn't surprise me to hear that the dev channel is now testing updates that will sit on top of the 22H2, also known as Nickel internally, the Nickel platform release. So the new dev channel will be testing features for moment updates, as well as most likely the 23H2 release. Now, we don't know if the 23H2 release itself will be a full sort of build upgrade, or if it will be a servicing style release. It ultimately doesn't matter because it's still the same platform. We're not getting a new platform release with the 23H2 launch, which wasn't originally the plan, of course, with Sun Valley 3, which has now been scrapped. Sun Valley 3 was supposed to be a new version of the Windows platform. That's been scrapped. That's now coming in 2024 as what we're calling Windows 12. Again, we don't know if it will be called Windows 12, but there you are. So what does this all mean? It means, well, the dev, beta, and release preview channels should now start receiving features in order again. So, the last few months we've had sometimes new features which show up in beta first. And like, what the hell? That makes no sense. It's because Microsoft was developing Windows 11 features, moment features, in this 23,000 range internally. Insiders in the old dev channel were ahead of that, so they would have to wait for the feature to be backported and forward ported to the beta and dev channel. Now, what will happen is sometimes you may see new features in dev first, but that makes sense because this is where the current sort of active development is going on for Windows 11 features. A lot of what's happening on the Canary channel will be platform under the hood stuff for now. Of course, it will get all of the Windows 11 features that show up in dev eventually. Sometimes it'll be at the same time. Sometimes it might be a week behind. Who knows? But and then maybe in 9 months, we may start seeing 1 or 2 features in the Canary channel specifically for Canary. And that will mean that these features are for the next version of Windows. And so that's how that's going to work going forward. And lastly, the builds in the Canary channel are going to be more unstable. And they're going to ship more frequently as well. So in addition to how it used to work and how it will continue to work for the dev channel is builds. Microsoft will select a build candidate on a Thursday or Friday. They will test that build over the weekend and throughout the beginning of the next week, and then on Wednesday usually they will say whether or not that build's good enough to go out, and then they will push it out to insiders. That process is being reduced significantly for the Canary channel, so it might only take 2 or 3 days for them to verify a build and get it out there now. And that also means that they may not always have documentation, which means not always will we get a changelog of the build. And it also means we won't know any known issues, and they may be, well, Microsoft says they will be more unstable to the point where some of them may not even boot. So you really don't want to be testing Canary builds on your main PC. Now, the big problem for insiders is everybody in the dev channel was automatically moved to Canary because Windows doesn't support downgrading to an older build number. So if you want to remain in the dev channel, you have to reinstall Windows. And that's kind of annoying, especially if you're somebody who has everything set up in a certain way and you've got hundreds of applications installed. That's going to be a pain in your backside. But you have to do it if you don't want to risk running these more unstable builds. I think 99% of the time it'll be fine, but you just never know with these builds because Microsoft doesn't know either. Dan, I know you're not in the dev or Canary channel, but what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think it's interesting that, Canary, we may start to see stuff for Windows 12 in, so that's going to be just the one to watch. I have no plans right now to install any of these on any of my devices, partly because it's just too tough to track, to be honest. I'm always switching between laptops and PCs. I'm not going to put, I use Release Preview on my main desktop. That's the only one that really I use all the time. That's pretty regular. And then I switch between a couple laptops. But if I start putting like Canary and Dev on certain ones, I forget which is what. Yeah. And, so it's just, I'm just not really set up. And plus, I'm just not quite on top of all the Windows changes as yours. That's why I hired you to do it. So, but I'm sticking with Release Preview just because I think it's fine. I think it's cool though that they're doing this. I think this makes more sense. I think this was, long overdue, and it's just a more familiar design process. It stinks if you're in Dev Channel or we're in Dev Channel, want to stay in Dev Channel, of course. But this is a one-time thing that will affect that, so it's not that big of a deal. But what would you recommend, I guess, to our audience in case they want to get, if they want the latest features but pretty stable? That'd be beta channel then, right?
That would still be the beta channel because what the beta channel will now, the purpose of the beta channel now really is it will receive in development builds of the next moment update. but the features
Yeah.
it receives should be pretty stable. So what I mean by that is it will get new features, but the moment update is still being shaped in that ring. So, you might get a new feature, and then the week after you get an additional new feature up until the point where that moment is shaped, and then that gets moved to the release preview channel. The dev channel will be where all the features are in development for moments, whether one be for the next moment or the one after. It may be on a different state of being done. So that's where the sort of less stable functionality comes from in the dev channel. So while dev is not testing a specific moment, it's just testing features for moments, the beta channel will be usually testing an upcoming moment as it's being shaped. So that's kind of where you want to be, I think, for most people, because that's also still based on the RTM build of Windows 11. So it's the builds it gets are servicing builds, so they're much smaller to install, they're quicker, and everything's just more smoother as a result. Dev channel is still getting full builds, so that process takes longer. I did the upgrade on my laptop from beta to dev with the new build, and it took 2 hours. 2 hours!
Wow.
So goodness. Whereas the servicing updates take 20 minutes, so they're very quick to install. So
yeah, beta may be what I consider.
Yeah.
I'll take a device and mail put beta on it, because now beta sounds exactly what it's supposed to be, which
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
beta, right? It makes much more sense. So basically, the workflow should be whatever's in beta will eventually get to release preview.
Exactly. Yeah.
And release previews, usually weeks before a moment, get to actually released. Although you start to see things pop up in release preview, like drivers sometimes come early, firmware comes early, and new app experiences can come early, but it's pretty stable. But yeah, beta actually sounds like kind of like the more fun one to actually start to see some of this new stuff pop in there. So maybe I'll jump into that and start doing a little bit more testing again. I don't think I'll put it on my desktop right now, but we'll see what happens. I don't know. I'll try it out. If it's stable. I haven't had too bad of an experience with any of these builds. That said, I did get another green screen of death 2 days ago on my release preview on this desktop here. I was just in the middle of like typing something, and then the computer just went green, and that was that. It's like, all right. So that's I think it's something related to RAM and the Intel stuff. I don't think it's Windows per se, but it could have been a driver related thing. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, cool stuff. Yeah, go on.
Real quick, I just really quick wanted to sort of mention that, this change also obviously does confirm what we've been talking about regarding the development cycle of Windows going forward. They are going back to 3 years for major releases of the Windows client or the Windows platform. You can pick your words. So that's kind of big news. So 2024 is when we're expecting this next major version of Windows to ship in whatever capacity it ships in, whether it be a Windows 11.1 or a Windows 12 or a Windows abstract name here remains to be seen. But that is when the next sort of major version of the Windows platform is coming. So that's something to look forward to. Again, the Canary channel, I think most of this year will be quite boring. It will basically just get features from dev channel. But at some point, things will start changing for that ring, and the platform will be improved in whatever way they're planning to improve that. And it will also start getting new features. Now, of course, since this is Panos Panay's Windows, we won't see any big UI changes in this ring before there's an event to announce it. That will always be reserved for a big public event. So if they are planning to do a Windows 12, you likely won't see any UI stuff until the very end when they do an event, like they did with Windows 11. Windows 11 was in development in secret, or sort of in an openly secret way in the Insider program for many months. It got things like Windows 64-bit ARM support. 64-bit app emulation on ARM. That was in testing for ages. That's a Windows 11 feature, which was in testing on, air quotes, Windows 10 builds. Of course, that was working towards Windows 11. You didn't see any of the Windows 11 interface until that event happened, and then a week later, it dropped in the preview program. The same will happen with whatever they're planning for 2024. So don't be expecting UI stuff. You might see some hints and some small things here and there, some references, or maybe even the ability to enable hidden
a rounded corner
features.
Here, a rounded corner there.
Going back to square corners, actually, Dan, for Windows 12. I don't know if you know this.
Oh, please don't tell me they're doing that. I'd be so mad.
But so that's what to expect for the next year or year and a half, I guess, for Windows, and it's pretty exciting.
Actually, the joke would be for Windows 12, Panos walks into the room. All right, how about no corners? We make a circular operating system.
I'm in. Let's do it. Every app Windows circle now. Yes.
Anyway, we'll see what happens. I do like the rounded corner stuff. I know that's controversial, but whatever. Let's move on to Bing chat news. So, of course, we should expect every week Microsoft is going to have news on this front. So this will probably be a regular feature on the podcast because there's now a Bing blog, which is just fun to say. I mean, I think there's always been a Bing blog. It just sounds so weird to say, but now it's being pretty updated regularly on Thursdays and Fridays with updates to what's going on with the Bing chat stuff. They've also had like Bing Maps updates and stuff like that there. So it's actually kind of an interesting read, by the way. So I would go check it out. Just type in Bing blog on your Bing app and you can go see it. But there were some major things this week. They did hit 100 million active users on Bing, which but even they poke fun of themselves, a little bit. They're like, we know we're in single digits and we're just a small fry here, but it's kind of a big deal for us. They're being kind of humble about it. They know they're far behind, but for them, that was a big, number. And I think 1/3, if I remember correctly, were like new users and stuff too. So, some pretty big stats. A lot of people have interest in there. We should also say that they've bumped the turn taking from 6 to 10. That means you can ask a question and have 10 turns back and forth before the AI will be like, all right, let's move on to another topic. It basically gets bored of you. And you can do up to 120 of those sessions per day, up from 60. Now, I know I've seen some people complain about this on Twitter, like they went and neutered it, now it's lame. And I'm like, all right, first of all, they even admit this is temporary. They did this because the AI would get wonky after so many turn takings. Right. And there's also this issue of quote unquote hallucinations where it would start interjecting false information into the response, which may not be clear to the user who's just reading it. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. So they're refining stuff. And so that's why they went from, 5 turns to 6 turns to 10 turns. Eventually, there probably won't be any turns, but this is like literally an open development. I mean, it's been in hidden development for years, but now that it's in regular weird people's non-engineer testing, they're getting a lot of feedback and people are finding weaknesses in it, which is the point. That's what they want to do. That's why they're rolling this out. That's why it's open. You have to sign up for it, but it's not anyone in the world could go use it right now, right? There's like a waiting list. And so they're getting this feedback and it's going to get better. And in fact, every week they're improving things. So, I don't know. It's just weird when I see people complain about this. Like I saw one person like Yusuf Mehdi, who's a corporate vice president, I believe, at Microsoft, but he's one of the people that's the front faces of this initiative, announced this news on Twitter. So it was like, oh, gee, thanks for being so generous. I'll stick with ChatGPT for $20 a month. And I'm like, wow, what a burn. You're paying $20 a month for ChatGPT, which is fine. If you want to spend $20 a month for that, cool. But as we all know, as you should know, ChatGPT doesn't have access to things past 2021, where the benefit of Bing is it does. It's all very current and relevant. That's sort of one of the main differences of it. But also the difference is you're not paying for Bing. So I don't know. I think it's weird to say you're paying $20 a month for it as a win. But this stuff will improve every week. It's going to get better. It'll be interesting to follow. They did also announce, Bing, the AI chat stuff is in Skype. I've actually never tried it. I don't really know even how to do it. I believe it's when you do a chat room, you create you invite multiple people to Skype and to a chat, and then you can call in Bing and have it so basically if you have your friends or something like that in there and, you could be like, hey, Bing, we want to go to a restaurant here, give us some recommendations and it'll use it. And they had some problems with delays there because this stuff is on a server and it goes, it uses a lot of processing power. And some of this is going to be tied to your Microsoft 365 account, which is why you do the login that way. And in other words, like if you pay for Microsoft 365, eventually you'll probably get a priority in terms of processing. And that's why people pay for the Chat GPT as well, because you get priority in processing. And so they're trying to balance the speed of stuff along with server demand. That's another reason why this is always slow to roll out. But now they're going to increase that as well in terms of the speed and performance. Now, I know a lot of people joke around. I always see this. See people like they're still updating Skype, which I mean, we're using it for the podcast right now. If you haven't used Skype in a while, you should go try it. For one, they've been updating it regularly. I mean, it gets a lot of updates, to be honest. It's every couple of weeks. They've changed a lot in terms of the UI and features. It's actually a really nice app. I would argue, of course, and I think they know this in a lot of ways, it's too little too late at this point, right? Because you have WhatsApp and Telegram out there, and it's really hard to compete with in those. It's a shame because it's still a neat app. And people are like, oh, do people use Skype anymore? It's like at the height of the pandemic, they were citing, now I forgot the name. It was like 30 or 40 million daily active users, and there's 300 monthly active users a couple of years ago. Like we're talking millions of people do use Skype. And the benefit of Skype, of course, it's cross-platform. It works on Mac, it works on your phone, it works on your PC, it works on the web, it works everywhere. And so it's just, and it's free, right? It's still, and yeah, there's Zoom, but Zoom just laid off a lot of people. And Zoom is still, if you ever try Zoom, it's not consumer friendly. So Skype is still sort of this default thing, but there is a lot of more competition, including from Google out there. So I understand that. But I'd like to see more of this stuff, and I'm sure we will. Obviously, they're putting the Bing Chat and the AI stuff into Teams. We haven't heard anything about GroupMe yet, and GroupMe is still out there. Still, that got a recent update as well with some new UI layouts. GroupMe is another one of those. It could have been Telegram, but it's not. But they can't get rid of it either because a lot of schools here in the United States, a lot of college kids use it for whatever reason. So I don't know. And you finally did a walkthrough video of all this on our YouTube channel that I believe is 17 minutes long.
It's 20 minutes with the added mobile demo I added on the end.
Yes. I requested Zach added the mobile experience too. So if you don't have access to this yet, or you just don't plan to, you're just kind of curious about it, go watch that video. Zach does a really good job of walking through basically the web experience, which is what most people are kind of focusing on, the chat thing, right? You go into Bing and you bring up the chat, what that looks like and what you can do with it. But then he does a section on Edge Dev, which is, I think, way more interesting. And I think people are sort of glossing over this because that has the 3 different sections in it, including Insights, the chat, as well as Compose. So he explains those and how those work and what you can do there. And then he also shows the mobile app, the Bing app, and how that works there, which I'm still waiting for them to add that to Microsoft Launcher. Specifically, Microsoft Launcher has the search bar, and there's a little microphone button on it. And when you hit it, right now it does this like cool little graphic, but it's just doing the old Bing search. And I don't know if in the Bing app for Android, I don't know if this is in just the beta channel, which is free. You can just enroll in the beta channel if you want, or if it's in the production. But I definitely know in the beta channel, because that's what I'm on, if you pin their search bar, this is confusing. Microsoft Launcher has a search bar and Bing has a search bar. You can literally pin both of them. If you hit that microphone button, it goes into the new Bing chat experience, which is cool in the way it kind of should be. So I'm waiting for that now to get to Microsoft Launcher. I'm not exactly sure why they haven't done it yet. But Zach, what are your thoughts on, because I know you don't really use this stuff that much, and I had to kind of walk you through sort of the experiences, like what you should show in the video and stuff like that. But now that you have used it, were you kind of surprised by some of the stuff like I shared with you, like say like the email responses?
Right. So yeah, I have tried. I've forced myself to use it more and more this week, just to sort of get a feel for it, because I've not been fully convinced that this is really groundbreaking stuff. But I will admit that some of what Microsoft is doing here with the Bing AI is really useful. The Edge Dev stuff specifically, the ability to to have it analyze web pages and pull in useful bits of information using that Insights tab is amazing. Like in the video I do, for example, I'm looking at an article and it pulls in questions that it thinks the article answers and just presents it to you in a little sidebar while you're looking at the web page. You can even use the Bing chat interface to basically ask it to summarize the page you're looking at or to find a specific piece of content within that page. I used it to. I was looking at the Windows Canary article in the video, and I asked it, "Does this article mention macOS anywhere?" It doesn't, and I asked Bing, and Bing said, "No, there's no mention of macOS in this article. I think it's really good. Then Dan mentioned that to me that it can also reply to emails. I thought, well, there's no way. But it does. It was analyzing my Outlook.com webpage and then the email I was looking at, and I asked Bing to write me a reply to this email with a positive tone, and it did that. And weirdly, Bing did say, do you want me to send this as a reply? And I said, yeah, do that. And it said, okay, I sent it, and it didn't actually send the email. Still, though, its ability to be able to generate that and just have me copy and paste it and then press enter myself is still much better than me having to sit there and think of a nice message to send back to this person who's asking for the status of a report. It's really mundane stuff that Bing Chat can really help out with there. That's really, really great. Now, the only area where I've found Bing really isn't utilized well, Bing AI specifically, is within search itself, which is funny because that's been the whole that's how they announce it. Is Bing search is getting AI, but I think it's a bit of a fad in regards to for two reasons. One, it's really slow. It's much slower than a traditional search. And two, it talks too much. And what I mean by that is sometimes you'll ask it a simple question and it will give you so much context around the answer, sometimes even burying the answer like 2 or 3 paragraphs down. So you have to wait for it to spell out or type out what it's saying before you get to the answer you're actually looking for. So I'll give you an example of Mike here using the mobile app. So, I'll open up the Bing app here. And, so let's ask it, when is the next leap year? Now, I know the next leap year is 2024. So the answer I want is the next leap year is in 2024. But let's see what Bing says. So if I press it here and go, when is the next leap year? Right, it's loading.
Searching for next leap year.
Still loading. I could have found out by now by Googling it, just so you know.
The next leap year is 2024. It will be on a Thursday, February 29th.
Okay, so it's still going.
Leap years
okay.
happen every 4 years to keep our calendar in alignment with the Earth's revolutions around the sun.
So that's great. It gave me lots of additional context that I wasn't looking for. It's nice to, I guess, know that, but I just wanted to know the year. Now, if we compare that to, say, Google or Bing or even, an assistant, let's ask Siri. When is the next leap year? All right, it's not saying it out loud for some reason. Oh, I've got my iPhone on mute. But it just says 2024. There's no additional context. All I wanted to know was when the year was, and Siri just delivered it straight away. And that's the real... It's just annoying that Bing is trying to be much more human. And that's a weird thing to say about AI. But for search, it is just weird, and I don't want it.
Well, I was going to say, there's 2 types of search technically, right? So if you just do a regular Bing search, let's see, next leap year, it just gives you, like, when I do this in the web, it immediately goes Thursday, February 29th, 2024.
Yeah.
And then if you want more info, you hit the chat button and it goes into that with that question. And then it goes into it. So they're giving you, and this in fact is part of the optimizations. For normal stuff like that, like current weather, just basic questions where you're just looking for a link or something like that.
Yeah.
It uses the regular Bing search, and it doesn't go to the AI stuff. If you want that, you then hit the chat button in the menu thing and go above. And they actually talk about this on the Bing blog, where they had a discussion, an internal debate with the engineers about how they should do this with search. Do they always want this AI enhanced search, or do we bifurcate it and all this? And they had a debate, and that's why they came up with this current design, which may not be perfect, and they admit that, but that's kind of what they're going with. So there's still basic search. Like if you just type in, like if you're using Edge and you just type in the address bar, a search, it'll just do regular Bing search and you'll get your answer right away. The chat stuff is supposed to be contextual based. And I get what you're saying with the button you're using. So you're using the Bing mobile app, and that has just like this, the new Bing logo. And when you press that, it brings up the voice, or you can hit the keyboard and type in your thing if you want it to be silent. But if you just use try using just the address bar in the Bing app, the top part.
Yeah, it will just do a normal search. You're right. You are right. But I do want to clarify what I'm saying here regarding for simple sort of single query searches, I do think the chat stuff is unnecessary and overkill, which
Yeah,
is, I think, the
absolutely.
majority of searches. Most people aren't searching for complex stuff. They're searching for news. They're searching for for a specific topic. Even typing Windows 11 news into Bing Chat is less useful to me than doing a traditional search and seeing the headlines there and being able to click into source material to read the news. Bing can summarize news, but I don't think I want it to. I kind of want to read the reporting from the people who are writing the reports. I may be alone in that category, I don't know, but I like to read news from sources rather than just from an AI that sort of summarized it. Where Bing search really shines with AI is with searches that would often require multiple queries. So in the video I do, for example, it's a very unlikely scenario, but in the demo I do in the video is, I want to fit a bunch of Xbox Series X consoles in the back of my Tesla. How many can I fit there? And what Bing does there is it does multiple queries. It figures out how the dimensions of the Xbox. It figures out the dimensions of the back of a Tesla, and then it walks you through the process. It walks you through how it figures out how many consoles it can fit in the back of a console, in the back of a car. Again, it's a bit annoying that it does that. I just want the answer, but it's like, okay, here's how you do it. It takes like a minute for it to actually get to the answer that I'm looking for. But it figures it out, and that's really its strongest asset in search, is the ability to merge queries and present them to you with an answer, and also a walkthrough. But yeah, and have you used it for that? Oh, you were just showing me a picture here. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm showing you a picture, and I put the link into the chat. If people are listening to this on the audio version, if you go to the Bing blog, sorry, I've got to keep doing that. And you go to the February 21st entry. It's called Building the New Bing. Building the New Bing on the Bing blog. They actually explain to you the Prometheus language model, basically how this is different from ChatGPT or actually GPT. So this stuff is really kind of confusing. So there's GPT, which is the language model designed by OpenAI, which then is used in ChatGPT, which is a specific iteration of the technology being used for a chat session. Microsoft took GPT 3.5 basically and has been building it into its own Prometheus engine, which combines stuff with Bing and search, and they add their own guardrails in which they're constantly updating and manipulating. But they go down into the discussion behind the product innovation, merging search and chat. So this is the discussion you're talking about here, which is, which is what. And they have a little cool image there with search on one side and chat on the other. Search is defined as basically, I know exactly what I want. You just want to find it. And chat is, I sort of know what I want. And they have different things here. So under regular search, they have YouTube, Amazon, Microsoft stock information, Montreal, Wikipedia. And then it starts going to the middle. You get weather. So weather could be like, maybe you want weather in your location. Maybe it's a different location. Maybe you want the forecast. Maybe you want more information about like what a bomb cyclone is,
Yeah.
Restaurants near me. That gets a little interesting, right? So yeah, you can just have restaurants near you, just gives you a list, but maybe you want, what are the best Indian restaurants near me, right?
Yeah.
And then you go to the chat side, and chat now has, what's the best coffee machine? How to write if else in Java, best low carb fruits with vitamin C, or here's a specific one, right? I need to throw a dinner party for 6 people who are vegetarian. Can you suggest a 3-course menu with a chocolate dessert, right? That, if you punch it to search, will give you nothing. If you punch it to chat, though. And so if you think of this gradient, and that's how they're kind of designing the Bing stuff around, and it's not easy, right? So we can argue that the current implementation and UX design is not ideal or could be improved. And I'm sure they might acknowledge that, which is why it's out there. And we will maybe see changes to that. So you're right. And on top of it, the general speed of the chat responses will improve over time. One of the things they've been open about is optimizing Azure so that this stuff does go quicker while also balancing power consumption needs and costs and all that. But as the AI improves, this stuff will get faster. So in other words, this to me is like a moot point. It's like talking about how computers were slow 10 years ago. It's like, sure, but things are going to improve, and we'll see that here too.
But yeah, so that is my point. For single sort of search queries, it really is, I think, overkill. And also, as you mentioned, it is currently much slower. But for things which require multiple queries, or are not something you would normally type into a search engine, then that's where it sort of shines. And I guess for me, that's a rare occasion. I'm not often doing stuff that would require the AI. But I'm sure there are people out there who will need that a lot more often. And so this is probably where it does shine. Now, I will give it credit where I was saying it talks too much. Bing does have actually 3 different modes now. It has a more creative mode, it has a balanced mode, which is default, and then it has a more precise mode. I just tried the precise mode, and the precise mode does just cut off at, yes, the next leap year is 2024. It does ask if you'd like to know anything else, but it doesn't give you that additional context, which is really nice. And so I'm assuming having precise mode on would kind of almost be necessary if Microsoft wanted to use it as like a Cortana replacement, because I think the biggest issue with it by far is that it talks too much when you just ask for simple queries, which is kind of what phone assistants are used for. You do ask phone assistants for simple queries. So if Microsoft wanted to use this technology in a phone assistant, for example, or if any other company does, like Google or Siri, they'd need to probably use the more precise mode, because otherwise it just won't stop talking. It's just like, all right, I get it, thanks.
And it's got to be sort of like, and by the way, one thing we should put in we forgot to put into the show notes here was, and this is related to what we're talking about, which is fine. This podcast is going to turn to the AI podcast, which is fine. I love talking about this stuff. But like Satya Nadella in an interview with Financial Times, it was technically like a month ago, but it was just printed recently. He called Cortana, Siri, and Google Assistant basically all dumb as a rock, which was funny. He even, threw Cortana under the bus a little bit, saying, we were kind of promised it was supposed to be like this and this digital assistant, and it did none of the things we were like really expecting it to be. And I think that in general, he's not wrong, right? Because like digital assistants were supposed to be kind of what we're doing now with generative AI, but they were just kind of dumb. And like, even like with Amazon's, I won't say the name to trigger anybody's thing, but like sometimes I'll ask it for something and then it'll just be like, it'll follow up with another question that's completely unrelated to the thing I'm talking about, I can also do this. And I get it. It's trying to advertise features to me that it can also do, which is nice. But sometimes you're just like, shut up. I don't want to know that.
Yeah.
And they got to find that balance, right? Like, so for instance, if you do like, ask about a leap year, like you may just want to know the next date, right? But then should it follow up with like, say we're talking about a digital assistant right now. So it's going to follow up with an audio response. Should it then follow up with a question to you like, hey, would you like to know more about this? Now you may want to, sure. Give me, why leap years happen, or, what's the deal behind them or something. On the other hand, you may be like, no. And that stuff can get annoying after a while, it's like, but how do you tell the user that it can do more, you can get more information without necessarily nagging you either, right? So this stuff is going to be kind of tricky. I do think that current new setting that they have, precise and more expanded, I think it's cool, actually. Yeah. That does, kind of solve the kind of problem you're talking about, so long as you're aware. But it's pretty when you go to the chat thing, it's right there on the page when you start, which mode you're in. Mm-hmm. And they have like a color coding, all this too, which I think is kind of nifty. So it's a learning experience. It's stuff that's going to improve. And I think, Satya is basically saying when he was throwing the voice assistants under the bus, and this was all of them, not just Cortana, of course, he's not saying they're useless and that's it. That's the end of the story. The main thrust of the article, because they also interviewed the co-designer of Siri, was generative AI is going to basically, we think, is going to make these assistants what we kind of want them to be, or at least one piece of that puzzle. And I think that's really kind of the big story here that we haven't seen necessarily happen. Of course, this raises the question, should Microsoft bring back Cortana? Or should they call it something else, or, getting back into this anthropomorphized thing that you talk to? I think they may go down that route, but they got to solve these other problems, including speed, nagging, how many follow-up questions should there be, how the audio should work, and all this, like, because everybody's going to be a little bit different, and they got to find that balance. But we're going down that path, right? That is the end goal, I would think. And how this evolves, I think it's going to be kind of really cool.
I do think the current implementation of voice assistants on phones really is probably more accurate to describe them as voice control for IoT devices, because that's really where they're most useful. And obviously, Bing can't do that. Bing doesn't have any integration with an IoT framework. I guess they could, in theory, add it. I don't see why that wouldn't be possible for them to have a basic layer for, basic on-device or IoT control. And then if you do sort of go beyond that boundary, it can start using GPT tech or whatever, the Prometheus tech to start being more intelligent. But Yeah, I mean, but also I do want to quickly mention that that comment by Satya is kind of funny because he's the current leader of Microsoft. The reason Cortana was bad was because he didn't make it better. That's his fault.
Uh, yes and no. I mean, hold on a sec. I gotta make sure my cat's not about to chew the cable to the alarm system, which, to be fair, is my fault for being so sloppily wired here. But it's true. But I would also argue the technology to make Cortana sort of what we expected it to be just didn't exist and wasn't there. The Cortana team, I should mention, is separate from the Bing team. Like, so they're not. There's different groups, and they sort of had different, designs and priorities and all this kind of stuff. Now, will that change? I couldn't even tell you the status of the Cortana group in Microsoft. I don't even know if there is one anymore. But I know obviously they're having these discussions internally about what they should do, and I think that's going to be kind of fun to watch. This stuff is going to improve. In fact, it's going to improve so much. There was someone in Germany who works at Microsoft in an interview. We have the story up. Basically, pre-announced GPT-4 coming next week. Now, what makes that interesting is Microsoft's using a version of GPT-4 that's based on for its Bing stuff, as I just mentioned, but they won't mention. It's not 3.5, but they're not saying it's 4 either. They're
like
just
3.8.
Yeah, no, they don't even say that. They're just saying it's a more advanced version. They say so. Right. I don't know why they're having that sort of that opposite. I can't say that word now, but why they're kind of hiding that info. But this new GPT-4 is supposed to be announced next week, and it could do multimodality, which means apparently it could do stuff with video now, which I don't know what that means, right? So, and how that ties into what Microsoft and Bing is doing, I'm not necessarily sure. Obviously, Microsoft and OpenAI very close. Microsoft basically has a couple exclusives with OpenAI, including first access to its technologies, and OpenAI uses Azure as its exclusive cloud provider. What that tells me, of course, is whatever is in GPT-4 will probably get into Bing, which means we may even get more Bing announcements in the coming weeks and months with other new features, right? And I guess that segues while we keep going into this news about AI stuff that Satya and Microsoft announced a new AI event. Can you tell us about the date of that? What we should experience there or expect?
So they have announced another AI event taking place March 16th. This one seems to be a little less hype around it. There's no secret press event that we're being invited to, at least not yet. There's none of that. It's just it appears to be a virtual event. Which will be hosted by Satya Nadella and a few others. And the theory, again, they've not really given us any hints as to what they'll talk about, but the theory here is they'll be primarily talking about Office and Microsoft 365 and how AI can enhance those workflows. In fact, I know they're working on Copilot for Word, for example, the ability to type into Word, hey, I'm writing this, that, and the other for XYZ, can you help me out? And Word will try and help you out. Obviously, it's not going to, I don't think it's going to be able to write full documents for you. I think that would be a step too far, but it will certainly aid you in the process and give you sort of formatting and certain phrases and words that maybe you can use as you type. But that sort of thing, I think, will be the start of this event. It will be primarily Microsoft 365. Will Windows be there? I don't think so. I have a feeling any AI stuff coming to Windows will be held for whatever Windows event they hold next year. But yeah, the Office, I think, is a likely contender for this event. And that's to be expected. I think we knew for a while that March would be when they talk about AI in Office. So this shouldn't come as much of a surprise.
Yeah, so they've already announced things for Teams, the transcription stuff, which is cool. You can do this already in Word, by the way. I used it recently. You can upload an audio file that, so I just did an interview with Razer that should be going up next week. And you can upload the audio file, and then it identifies the speakers. It'll be speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3. And then you can edit speaker 1, which was, say, me, and I type my name in it, and then it changes everything to me. And I can name everybody. Then also now I have a full transcription, and it's there on the side and the rights in Word. And then I can start writing the article and basically go through and just directly quote people. So that's another case of this kind of summarization stuff. But yeah, I mean, this AI stuff into Office makes a ton of sense. That's where it's going to be primarily useful. You already see it. Gmail does this. Outlook does this, where you start typing and then it goes and completes your sentence for you, and you just hit tab, which is actually becoming super useful. You can also see it with grammar corrections and suggestions, and not just spelling, right? Grammarly is already well ahead in this, in my opinion, but Microsoft Editor is also gaining a lot of ground here and doing this. It's now being able to adjust to tone if you want to be professional or not, use slang, and you can do all these different settings. All this stuff is going to be, I think, really help productivity and stuff like that. And I think that's really the more interesting story. Now, two things about this. One, you mentioned you probably won't write you a paper. And I saw some people complaining about this, which is not new, but yeah, Bing Chat, if you ask it to write you a paper or anything like that, it won't do it. It'll flat out tell you, I'm not here to do that for you. I'll give you direction. I'll give you some pointers. I'll give you an outline suggestion, but you got to do the work. And some people are like, oh, that's lame. I'm like, first of all, it's called the Copilot for the web. It's not Bing Pilot for the web.
Yeah.
It's not here to do your work for you. And this is where Prometheus comes into play. This is where Microsoft puts up these guardrails, and part of their what they call responsible AI. They don't want AI to be this thing that cheats for you. Now, other companies probably will do this. It'll be the irresponsible AI, right? They're going to. And if you didn't see it this week, South Park, who is back again. I have a love-hate relationship with South Park. Used to be a huge fan. The last couple of seasons have been lame. It'd be like, oh, new season, 5 episodes. You're like, wait, what? What do you guys take off a year and a half and you do 5 episodes? Anyway, but they're back, and they just did an episode called Deep Learning, and it was about ChatGPT. It was actually really funny. It was a good episode, but it was also very you could just predict everything that was going to kind of happen. The main thrust of it was really funny. Was one of the kids was texting his girlfriend, and she was absolutely gaga over what he was saying, because it was so well thought out and had emotion to it and all this. And like Stan asked, how you doing this? He's like, psst, buddy, ChatGPT. And he's like, what? And then he shows him, and it was funny because I believe it was Stan's, his thing was every time Wendy would text him like something serious and I miss you and I really care for you, he would just reply with a thumbs up, which is the equivalent of using just K when you're responding to someone. And so you just look at her text messages, it's just all thumbs up from him. And so she was getting really sad because she's like, oh, maybe he doesn't really care about me and all this. And he finally learned about ChatGPT, and it's funny because like he just does like a couple like stroke. He copies her text, puts it in ChatGPT, gets a response, he copies it back, pastes, sends, and then her face lights up. She's like, "Oh my god," And he keeps doing this. And next thing you know, he finds himself in like real conversations with her, and has no idea what she's talking about because he's not reading the stuff he's sending. And then the kids end up, of course, using ChatGPT to write term papers for them, which is really hilarious because they're like in 4th grade, but the papers they're writing are like just like really advanced political science like topics. Right. And then the teacher, what's his name there, Mr. I forgot the teacher's name, but he starts using it to correct their papers, and no one knows what they're all doing and all this kind of stuff. So it's a pretty predictable episode. At the end, in the credits, it says Trey Parker plus ChatGPT. They actually use like ChatGPT supposedly to write some of the conclusion. I'm not really sure about that, but it was pretty expected and all that. It also had this weird anti-corporate like thing about, we shouldn't let the corporations control OpenAI, which I kind of get with Microsoft, but Microsoft is also being very transparent. What I said, like if you type in responsible AI, it goes to, they have a whole web page and documents, and they're being very transparent about what they are doing with AI and how they think it should be done in a responsible way. And I think that's kind of cool. But I get, who's going to control this technology, right? It's kind of an interesting thing, but I don't know. And if you want to see even more irresponsible use of AI, you can go to my Twitter page where I retweeted a video with Tucker Carlson from Fox. Someone took him and did a deep fake talking about, Pokemon, but it's a very X-rated Pokemon thing. It's so funny though, but it's just like, between deep fakes and all this stuff and the voice stuff, we're heading down a path that I don't think people are necessarily prepared for.
Mm.
But that's the other half of all this
Well, I
stuff.
will say there are already schools are already implementing anti-AI systems where they can roughly check if something's been written with AI or tampered with AI. So I don't think you're going to be able to write term papers and this, that, and the other using AI. You can use it to help you, certainly, but you will have to be clever with how you implement it, I think. You're going to have to be smarter than you look if you're trying to use AI to write a term paper, because you need to integrate it. You know, like copying someone's homework, you're going to have to change it up a bit for it to pass the checks.
The TLDR there is you can use AI to detect AI. So.
Yeah, exactly. But I had another point before we moved on, but I've forgotten it. Well, what was it?
Well, while you're thinking, I'll just mention on South Park they did address that, and they were like, we're going to bring someone in who can detect that, but it turns out to be like this weird shaman guy with falcons, and like God, it gets really weird about how he can sniff out who people are using the AI and stuff. It was pretty absurd. But
no, I can't remember the point. So let's move on from this. We spent enough time on AI, I think.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, wow, 52 minutes. Sorry, but it's interesting stuff. Yeah. I guess we should do the ad read.
Yes. You're first.
Okay, am I going first here?
Yep.
All right. So we got Magic Mind is sponsoring us again. Thank you. If you don't know, Magic Mind is basically a nootropic. I believe it's nootropic. I used to say nootropic, but it's nootropic. Drink used for energy and mental clarity. And before you go, it's just another 5-hour energy or a Red Bull. Nope, it's not like that at all, because this isn't relying on caffeine to overstimulate you, which can cause problems for a lot of people. Personally, I envy you if you're very sensitive to caffeine. I'm always have been kind of immune to it, but this uses different stuff. Basically, these are what are called nootropics, and so there's a lot of different ingredients in there, including matcha, which is contains way less caffeine than coffee, and also contains additional compounds called catechins. And they mix it with L-theanine, which is a amino acid that you can take. That you can actually just take this with coffee. You can just go buy L-theanine. It's just it gets a little expensive if you start sourcing all these ingredients. But L-theanine balances out caffeine and gives you a boost so that it's not as like excitatory as it should be. There's also ashwagandha, which is all over the place these days. It's an adaptogen. So again, an adaptogen is not a stimulant. It just helps your body cope with anxiety and stress and can give you energy in a different way. There's all different types of adaptogens. If you just Bing search it, you'll get all sorts of interesting results. And this stuff has been around for a very long time. There's rhodiola rosea is another one, another famous adaptogen. I've been taking that. I've been taking a lot of this stuff on my own for years. What's cool about it is also lion's mane mushroom. It's another nootropic and adaptogen. It reduces anxiety and inflammation while also supporting cognition by preventing neural degeneration and stimulating neural regeneration. Lion's mane has definitely been implicated in creativity as well. There's also cordyceps mushrooms, not the dangerous kinds like in The Last of Us, but also reduces inflammation, strengthens your immune system, and supports higher energy and physical endurance by ramping up the production of ADP in your mitochondria. And what's cool about this stuff is you can take it comes in a little tiny bottle. It tastes really good to me. It kind of tastes like a concentrated tea, and you can just shoot it down like a shot, and it's actually less liquid, I think, even than a 5-hour energy. It doesn't 5-hour energy. It kind of works, but it tastes like saccharine cough medicine. It's really nasty. This is not like that at all. There's no like artificial sweeteners in it and all that junk. And it's not strong where you're going to get a jolt of energy and then crash afterwards. This stuff is just a lot more tame, but you can also just throw it into water and mix it that way and just sip it as you want. And what's cool about it, since it's so tiny, you can just throw a couple of these in your pocket, take them to work with you, and just take them as needed. But like I said, you're not going to get the experience you do with drinking a ton of coffee. And I'm also one of those people, like, I like coffee for the flavor. You give me like if I give 3 coffees in a day, though, I start to feel gross after a while. This, again, doesn't do that. And I've had this up before. It's really good. It tastes great. It gives you that extra boost of energy without feeling jittery and just overstimulated. And like I said, it's all natural ingredients. They list them on the label. It's easy to read and all that kind of stuff. I encourage you, actually, go to their website, look at the ingredients, take advantage of Bing Chat and start asking about research on these things. Ask it about rhodiola rosea, what the research suggests about it, or Bacopa monare and what the research is, because there is actually a lot of research on this stuff. It's actually really kind of cool. I think it's safer and better than stimulants that people rely on these days. But you can go to magicmind.co, not com, magicmind.co/WCP. And you can also use a code there. You get up to 56% off your subscription for the next 10 days using the code WCP. If you don't want to do a subscription, you just want to try this stuff, that's fine too. Just go there, use the code WCP for a one-time purchase. You can get 20% off of that and try it out yourself. And you can buy these in different, like just a couple of them. You can buy a couple boxes. You can do the subscription, so it'll just mail it to you every month, which is really nice. And 56% off is a pretty big discount as well. So make sure you go try that. Definitely good stuff. I don't know. I'm I've had to explain this to people before. Like, I'm a low energy kind of guy. I know I don't sound it on the podcast, but when I'm just at home working behind a computer and not talking, I don't feel excitatory. My brain just doesn't get like that. My theory is I'm going to live to 110, but I'll be like a turtle, and I'm just going to be like meh the whole time. Whereas other people are, you meet people in person, they're super hyperactive, like Russell Brand. I think Russell Brand just got to burn out at 62. Like, he'll just fizzle, because I don't know how he maintains that much energy. But this stuff helps me at least feel mentally more clarity and a little bit more, I don't know, alert, which I need for my job. Writing every day, managing people every day. It's like your job, right? Everybody's job out there. It's you need that a little extra boost without getting overstimulated. And you can take this later in the evening, and it's not going to keep you up like a coffee does. So give it a shot. That's magicmind.co/WCP. Tell them Windows Central sent you there for that discount. As always, thanks to Magic Mind for sponsoring us. All right, let's move on to the next topic, which is going to be Surface Laptop Studio 2. Zach, tell us about what this happened here with this leak, because I know a lot of people are asking about this. I'm personally very excited about this, but what happened with this leak, and what should we expect, and when, maybe?
Yeah, so essentially a couple of weeks back, benchmarks for what looks to be the next Surface Laptop Studio 2 appeared on Geekbench, confirming a couple of specs. None of this too surprising, I don't think, although I guess we'll see how Dan feels after we talk about it. But the Geekbench results confirmed that it does look like Microsoft is testing versions of the Laptop Studio 2 with a 13th gen Intel Core i7, 13800H, which is the laptop's version of the high-end i7 13th gen model, along with 64 gigs of RAM and an NVIDIA RTX 4060 laptop GPU. Now, that is quite powerful. That will make the Surface Laptop Studio easily the most powerful Surface shipping in the market, assuming it actually ships when we think it will, which is in the spring. Certainly more powerful than the Surface Studio 2 Plus, which only has a 3060 in it, not even a 3070, and a way more powerful than the current Surface Laptop Studio, which only has a 3050 in it. So yeah, that's going to be a huge upgrade. They've been testing a couple of other models, one with an Intel Core i7 13700H with 16 gigabytes of RAM and Intel Iris Xe graphics. There's also an i5 version without dedicated graphics as well. But yes, the sort of TLDR there is 13th gen Intel 4060, Intel 13th gen NVIDIA 4060 RTX graphics card will likely be what's the star of the show for the next Surface Studio 2.
Tell me, because I don't have the article in front of me, the i5 processor was not an H series there, right? It was a P series, I believe. Am I correct in that?
Yes, it was a P series. Now, I didn't mention it here. Give me a sec to find it again. But you're right, it's a P series. I think
this is super interesting for a couple reasons. I've been talking about this on the podcast for a while, that 10th gen is fine with Intel. It's a good processor, gets really good battery life. But the jump between that and 11th gen is just massive. 11th gen, just because 11th gen goes to big little architecture, has way more cores, and Windows is more optimized for using these cores for balancing off workload. I talked about it on the last podcast, I believe. But I've talked about this before as well. The Surface Laptop Studio, personally for me, I like it has the GPU, but I technically don't need it that often. I have, as I say, I don't use it. I don't use it for gaming, but I have used it. I take it with me sometimes on trips and events, because I use specific AI software by Topaz Labs that can upscale or sharpen or denoise photos. It uses advanced AI techniques that can rely on the RTX GPU. It's really funny when you do it. You can actually hear the tensor cores go like a high pitched noise as it's being used. So I use it for that. But outside that specific instance, I don't need the GPU. And that Core i5 version with the P chip, which is still a very powerful processor, like it's ridiculous compared to what the last gen H series would have been for 10th gen. And having no GPU, it should get really good battery life. And to me, that's like kind of would be almost the ultimate laptop studio for myself. Besides, of course, I'd love to have 5G, but now I'm asking too much. But I think that's a really cool, and that's a much more affordable option too once you drop the GPU. But it's something to think about, especially if you're like, well, what about gaming? I like to game. Like maybe think about using xCloud for gaming if you can. I mean, unless you're gaming where you don't have good internet connection these days, but like most places have pretty good Wi-Fi. Because if you use xCloud gaming and you pair up an Xbox controller, you bring that display forward, like you're gonna be able to technically play games at probably a better clip than you would natively on some instances. Or if you're using the GeForce Now, you definitely could because that's being powered by 4080s. I don't know. I think that's a really cool option. So
yeah, just to
but
confirm
that said,
the model they were testing is the i5 1350p. So yeah, it is a P series.
Got it.
And that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and that said, though, if you go with the H series with the GPU, yeah, you're right. That's a powerful laptop right there. Like that's going to take things like it's going to be night and day between the performance of the current generation and that one. So
well, I'm just looking here that they're comparing benchmarks using the same version of Geekbench to a first gen Surface Laptop Studio to a second gen. First gen gets a single core score of 1920, multi-core score 6256. The Laptop Studio 2 gets a single core score of 2,564 and a multi-core score of 12,463. That is double the performance of multi-core.
That's where you get it. It's that multi-core performance. Single core is still really good, but Intel's always been good at single core performance. In fact, they always beat AMD usually in that. But the multi-core is where you just see this like doubling of the performance. Crazy. I mean, it's a really, and you feel it when you're using Windows. Like it really is kind of a big difference.
You may not know. Do you know what the difference is between the 13700 and the 13800 is? Because they
usually just core speeds.
Interesting. Okay, maybe they're deciding which one to ship when they're doing those tests. Because these are prototypes they're testing internally. These aren't retail units.
Yeah, I don't think there's a core difference in terms of numbers. Sometimes there is, but I don't think between those two. I would have to look it up, but sometimes they can get different core numbers.
I guess the other notable spec we've got here is that they're testing a version with 64 gigs of RAM, which would make this the first Surface to ever ship.
Wow.
64 gigs of RAM. The current max is 32 gigs, which you can get in the Laptop Studio, the Surface Studio 2 Plus, and I think the Surface Laptop 5 is available with 32 gigs of RAM. It's the Pro 9. I think the Pro 9 is as well. I think they all ship with 32 gigs of RAM. But yeah, seeing 64 gigs of RAM would be something else entirely. That
makes sense for you combine that with that GPU and CPU. You got a really powerful machine there.
Seriously.
And one thing I love about the Surface designs, and I keep harping on, is the fact that they don't have bottom ventilation. So you put this thing on your lap, it vents. It pulls in from the side and vents out the side, and so you're never blocking airflow. The fans are pretty quiet. Like I don't ever hear the fans really on it. I love the Laptop Studio. It's got the best touchpad out there as well. Someone mentioned the i5 version with a external GPU could be the best of both worlds. Yeah, that works. I still like external GPUs, but they're I still think people conceptually like them more than actually like them, in the sense that people don't actually really go buy the GPU and the enclosure for it. And again, if you have a permanent setup, you go to your work office or in your home office and you just have that set up, that would work brilliantly with Laptop Studio. Plug it in, now you get a GPU and all that kind of stuff. If you're willing to put out that money and you want that setup, sure. That's another good option because you do get Thunderbolt 4 with these. So
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention was that we are so. In addition to the specs that have sort of leaked here, it should probably clarify that just because we're seeing these specs on Geekbench, don't mean they'll ship in those specific configurations. They are again prototypes.
Yeah.
They're probably testing different configs. Not all of them likely to ship. I am surprised that they are testing the 4060 versus the 4050. The 4050 a thing? Maybe the 4060 is the new 4050. I don't know.
4050 is a thing.
Yeah, I'm very
it's
surprised that they're putting the 60 in there because the laptop one is the 3050, and I assume they did that because the 3060 just runs too hot. But I guess
Yeah.
maybe not. I don't know why.
The
They didn't do
Galaxy
that.
Book 3 Ultra, which I've talked about in the last podcast, a 16-inch. It's a pretty thin laptop, has a 4050 in it. Although you can get a 4070 in it too. Yeah, the new RTX cards are surprisingly small, and the thermals are surprisingly
good.
good too on them. Yeah, it really is a big performance and thermal difference between the last couple of generations. I'm always just surprised by how kind of quiet these things are. That's not to say you can't push it and hear the fans and they go, of course you can, right? If it depends what you're doing. But for everyday operations, when you're just using these things, they're dead silent. It's actually really kind of cool.
Yeah,
So,
I've been using the Laptop Studio 1 full time. It's been my whole laptop since I got it in October 2021, and I love it. I think it's probably the
it's
best
such a
Surface.
good device.
It's really nice.
The audio is great. Yeah, the only thing you want is, of course, a higher resolution display. But
Yeah, that would be nice, but I know we're not getting that, so I'm over it. But I will mention that the other thing I've been hearing about the Studio 2 laptop, sorry, the Surface Laptop Studio 2, is that we are unlikely to see any design changes, which makes sense. This is only a second-gen device, and the first-gen one is already quite radically different from any other Surface released before it. And then also I've been hearing that there's unlikely to be a new larger model, which is probably going to be a bit disappointing for some people. So it will still be the 14.4 inch. I was kind of hoping we'd see maybe a 16-inch version.
Yeah.
That seems to be the trend these days, but I'm hearing no. But hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong on that.
yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe right, that'll come out of left field. I will say that I could understand if they're being conservative right now because the laptop market has, dropped significantly, both due to market conditions as well as kind of a saturation point. It's still above pre-pandemic, but they may not want to release it right now. Wait till the market recovers a little bit and do it for the third generation, or they don't even need to necessarily do that. They could announce it later this year, just as a separate thing,
That's true.
Although, if you bought a 14, you might then have a little bit regret that you didn't get a 16, right? So I can see that being a difference. Sarah looked it up, and she says that the 4060 mobile is comparable to the 3070 mobile. So yeah, it's a powerful GPU. So if you need that, I'm telling you, it's gonna be a cool laptop. It's still one of my favorite laptops out there. So if you're looking to get one, I would just hold out for hopefully a couple more weeks till you can get one. But really, really cool stuff. Speaking of processors, let's move on to Intel chip. This Intel chip just broke the Cinebench R23 world record, beating out AMD Threadripper. If you don't know, Cinebench R23 is actually a free benchmarking tool. You can just go to the Microsoft Store and download it on your computer. And it does what we were just talking about, a single core and multi-core test. It's different from Geekbench because Geekbench actually uses a little bit of the GPU here and there, and it tests different scenarios of using your computer to come up with a score. It's kind of like PC Mark, where it's a little bit more elaborate. Cinebench is literally just a straight CPU test doing a single task, which is assembling a photo tile by tile. It's actually a really boring test to watch. It takes 10 minutes to run each test. You got to run it on a single core and then a multi-core test, and then you get the total score to see how it compares. Anyway, apparently the Intel Xeon W9 345X just earned a top spot, beating AMD Threadripper, the 5995WX that held the record previously. Intel's processor earned a Cinebench R23 score of 132,484. The previous record-holding Threadripper processor score was 121,215. So 132,000 versus 121,000. As someone who does this benchmarking, that's a pretty big difference. That's not like they just beat them. Now, I'm assuming they did this. I'm trying to read this now. Yeah, the Xeon has 58 cores and 116 threads compared to the Threadripper 64 cores and 128 threads. So that's kind of interesting. Intel apparently is doing more with its lesser threads, which is kind of impressive. They're probably doing this as liquid cooling. I mean, it's not even liquid cooling. I saw them use the Core i9. Was it the 12th gen or the 13th gen? I think it was the 13th gen. And then they put liquid nitrogen on it, and they went over 5 gigahertz, I think it was. I saw that done live in Israel. Now, that's not a realistic scenario, but it goes to show you, this technology, sure, it's not, this is a server, right? Xeon is for servers, so you're not going to put this in a laptop or computer. But this technology trickles down, right? This is where the cutting edge stuff happens, and then it comes down to the next generation stuff. I'll also say Intel, though, is also getting ready to do another architectural change with its next generation chips with the chiplet design. So they're gonna keep the big small architecture design, but they're kind of dividing up the chip a little bit more. So things are going to get a little bit better, and we should start to see more efficiency as well, which will be important for laptops. But these things are just going to keep getting faster and faster. So where does ARM fit into this? We don't know. These chips will blow away what Apple has. The argument that Apple has is the same one AMD tries to make, which is, well, we're more efficient. And that, for certain instances, makes sense. In other instances, if you're running a server, doesn't necessarily matter. Although if you're running these chips on a lot of servers, yeah, you do want power savings, which is why ARM is actually going into the server business as well. But there you go. We'll continue to see what happens with that. Sorry, we got another ad read there. Zach, you want to handle this one?
Yeah, I can do that one. So I'd like to thank Indeed for sponsoring this episode of the Windows Central podcast. When it comes to hiring, you need to trust your gut. But what if you could give your gut some help? When you want to find top talent fast, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform for where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. You can find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. And if you hate waiting, Indeed's US data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. One of the reasons why I think Indeed is better than the rest of the market is that you can candidates you invite can apply through Instant Match, which are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in search, according to US Indeed data. So Indeed knows when you're growing your own business and you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. So you can visit Indeed.com/WCP right now to start hiring. That's Indeed.com/WCP. Indeed.com/WCP. Terms and conditions do apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Thanks Indeed for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. And now we should be getting back to our last topics of the day, which is Sony. Let's talk about Sony.
Actually, before we move to Sony, I just want to mention in Microsoft Office or Microsoft 365, whatever you want to call it, specifically Word, I don't know if people know this, but if you go into Word and you go to File and you go to Account, and then you go to under the logo, it says Microsoft 365 and Office Updates, and then it says Office Insider. You can actually join the Office Insider channel, and there's 2. There's like an early one, and then there's beta. Change channel. Yeah, you can do current channel preview and then the beta channel. The preview is the early access to new features, and then beta is just a little bit more standard. The reason I bring this up is they finally have introduced the ability to when you copy paste, you can go Control Shift V, it'll just paste the content without formatting by default, which for some reason always broke on mine. And I think it has to do with the fact that some of the features of Word sync across the web and stuff like that. But like, I'll just start typing one day and I'll go Control V and it does the formatting. I'm like, why? I just turned it off. And you have to go into File Settings, Advanced, and do the thing, and it was just really, really annoying. So this is something that's been, I think, long overdue, because I think the days of, there are very specific instances where you might want to paste formatting. I get it. And it still can. You still absolutely can do that. It's just by now default, it won't. If you want that feature now, you can go into the Insider channels and sign up for it. The Insider channel does cool stuff too. You get a little bit more of the newer UI stuff that's been going on. But overall, it's kind of cool stuff. So
yeah,
there we go. Let's talk about that Sony news. Zach, what happened there? Why is Sony being jerks again?
Well, I mean, I think we're all aware at this point that Sony does not want the Activision Blizzard deal to go through. They want Microsoft to not be able to acquire Call of Duty. They're kind of worried about it. And up until now, they've been saying all sorts of things as to why they don't think this deal should go through, including the fact...
Activision Blizzard.
Activision, that's what I said, didn't I?
No, you said Call of Duty.
Sorry, Call of Duty, which is part of Activision Blizzard. Sony up to now have been saying all sorts of reasons as to why they think this deal shouldn't go through, including that Microsoft hasn't offered them a good enough 10-year deal or whatever the case may be. However, this week, a person by the name of Lulu Shen Mezovi, I probably butchered the pronunciation of that, she's the EVP of Corporate Affairs and the CCO at Activision Blizzard. She said that the CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment answered the question as to why Sony doesn't want the deal to go through. And by that, she sort of means these words. Apparently, she says, in his words, he said, "I don't want a new Call of Duty deal. I just want to block your merger." Which really is Sony showing its true colours here. And to be fair, we've kind of known this. You know, Microsoft has offered its hand in every which way it can to sort of help Sony understand that this deal isn't to spite them. They want to help everybody, which may be only partly true. Who knows? But Sony has just been outright refusing to take any hand from Microsoft. And these comments from the CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment kind of confirm that, yes, they're not interested in making a deal with Microsoft. They don't want to make a deal with Microsoft. They don't want to have to deal with Microsoft. They don't want Microsoft to buy Activision. And yeah, so all of their complaining and they're kicking their feet and whatnot has been because they just want to stop this in any which way they can. And yeah, I think hopefully this shows that any regulating bodies who are sort of unsure about this deal, that Sony is really just crying wolf, I guess, in regards to all of its air quotes legitimate concerns, which are, you know, paper thin at best. I did see that, was it the UK? I guess it was. I think it was the UK. The UK regulating body was unconvinced that Microsoft's deal with Nintendo would actually be applicable because the Nintendo Switch is not powerful enough to run Call of Duty. I think what the deal likely
it can
implies...
run Doom, the new Doom games, but it can't run Call of Duty.
Yeah, but even then, I think that the deal probably implies that future games of Call of Duty will be built with the idea that it can scale up to high-end PCs and down to mobile chipsets like what is in the Nintendo Switch. You know, I can't imagine Microsoft made that deal with Nintendo, fully expecting to not actually be able to fulfill it. So, yeah, I wouldn't worry about that if you are Nintendo. But yeah, I just really hope this deal goes through because it's been dragged out for so long now. This deal was announced like 13 months ago now or 12 months ago. It's been...
I mean, I've been hearing it might not be resolved till the end of this year even. I think it's going to go on for a little while.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say some of the excuses are hilarious, which Jez Corden tweeted out. Like, they keep bringing up Call of Duty as if the entire gaming industry is propped up by Call of Duty. Right. Don't get me wrong, Call of Duty is a big franchise, no doubt about it. But the idea that, like, it makes or breaks entire systems is hilarious. Nintendo Switch has done quite well without Call of Duty so far, last I checked. And yeah, they can do most likely a cloud version of Call of Duty for Nintendo Switch. You know, it's not Microsoft's problem that the Nintendo Switch's hardware is not necessarily capable of running it. And it can run natively, right? And this leads up to another argument we saw, and I tweeted out on Twitter, which was hilarious, which was it's actually bad if Microsoft wants to port it to the Nintendo Switch because that would drive out resources for Call of Duty, which then would make the franchise even worse for all the other platforms. So the argument here is that companies shouldn't try to bring its games to multiple platforms because then they can't innovate as fast on those platforms. And I'm just like, that is the weirdest thing I've ever heard, because up until this point, everybody was against exclusives. Now it's like, whoa, slow down. If we start to not have exclusives, and then, and this presupposes the idea that like the company, the studio that's doing Call of Duty does the port. And that usually is not the case. Nine
Right.
times out of 10, when a gaming studio has a big game, they want to port it to either PC, the Switch, or something else, or from PS5 to Xbox. They don't do it themselves. They hire another company who is good at porting games, and they contract them to do it. And that would be what would happen here. It also presupposes that Microsoft is like on a real fixed budget and couldn't afford to do this. Like, no, God, we have to sacrifice. Now, maybe it would cause the Call of Duty franchise to slow down a bit. I don't see that as a necessity, though. And I just think a lot of people are making these weird arguments now that they don't want. They're basically saying, no, we don't want Call of Duty on multiple platforms. That'll be bad for the system. Like, which way do you want it? But Sony here is just, yeah, they're being really, like I said, though, you almost can't blame Sony, right? They have a duty to their shareholders to try to block this and make sure it doesn't happen, because it will strengthen Microsoft and put them in a better position. It won't allow them necessarily to dethrone Sony, but they'll be a lot more competitive. And if you're a shareholder of Sony, you're going to say, hey, make sure you go out and fight this tooth and nail, even if you're going to be kind of deceptive or dishonest. And that's what we're
Yeah.
seeing here. It's just playing out in public. So
I've seen a lot of people replying to this person on Twitter saying, what is the source? Is it just your word against theirs, this, that, and the other? I will say that this is a top level executive at Activision. For them to essentially lie and say the CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment said this when they didn't would be slander, and that is.
Yeah, she gave the date too when it
Yeah.
when it was said, and I think gave some sources for it too. But yeah, she wasn't. Yeah, she's not making
I
this up.
highly
Yeah,
doubt
again,
she's lying. It would make no sense. Business-wise, it would make no sense. And if it was proven that she was lying, that this whole deal would likely fall through. The regulators wouldn't trust them anymore, and it would be a real bad move on their part. So, yeah,
Well,
I don't think
and that's
this
why
is a lie.
that's why anybody should be, like I said, the brutal truth here, the real politic behind it is, Sony wants to block this because it would benefit Microsoft. That's the end of the story.
Yeah.
That
Yep.
means any reason that Sony gives as to why this is bad should be questioned, because they're not necessarily looking out for gamers.
No,
Like
definitely
this
not.
idea that like Sony is concerned about the gamers and the environment. No, they're not. That's not their responsibility. Their
No.
responsibility as a corporation is to be worried about their wallet, and its effect on shares and shareholders. That's their responsibility. That's who they're answering to, not gamers. I don't know what point gamers thought corporations were necessarily looking out for their interests. Even Microsoft here, they're not really looking out for
No.
the gamers' interests. They want to buy Activision Blizzard because they know it'll put them in a better position in terms of gaming and developing games and controlling certain IP. It's not to, sure, it'll go to Game Pass, stuff will go there and they'll get benefits for people, but that's
Yeah.
not the sole reason why they're doing this either. So it's like gamers, I have a mixed relationship with gamers. Obviously, most of them are good people. They just want to play games, and that's the end of the story. But the people who get into these like flaming wars and choose sides, it's just like you do realize these are just multinational corporations fighting for their shareholders, right? Like you're the object being sold, not taken care of. Sony isn't your friend. Microsoft isn't your friend, right? You may like them and what they do, but the ultimate thing is these companies make money and need to make a profit. And that's the only thing that's driving all these decisions. So you got to choose which side you want. But, some of Sony's arguments here are just getting like ridiculous at this point, and they should be called out for it,
Yep, I will say that if Microsoft does actually get to acquire Activision and does indeed have Call of Duty as an IP, having Call of Duty on Game Pass day one will be a huge selling point for Game Pass, because obviously PlayStation doesn't really have its own version of Game Pass, at least not yet. And even if it did,
they kind of do actually. I believe they do.
Do they? Okay, well they wouldn't have Call of Duty. That wouldn't be an IP for them on Sony's version of streaming on day one at least. And the other thing is, as a result of that, is PlayStation gamers would have to pay $70 to play the new Call of Duty, whereas Xbox gamers only have to subscribe to Game Pass. So that's what, $10 a month? I don't actually know how much Game Pass is anymore.
It's 10 or 15, depending
10 or
on
15.
the ultimate.
It's significantly cheaper, and that's a good example with Halo Infinite. When Halo Infinite came out, it's a $60 game. But if you're a Game Pass subscriber, you paid $10 a month. And if you only wanted to play Halo Infinite, you could subscribe for 1 month. Sometimes you even get a $1, you can get it for $1 if it's your first or second time subscribing. So you can play Halo Infinite for $1. That's the real benefit to gamers.
Yeah.
And why Sony is primarily upset with this whole thing, because it means Call of Duty will be cheaper to play on Xbox. There's more value on Xbox. So why would people buy the PlayStation to play these games? Because you're spending X amount on the console, then significantly more on individual games. Whereas on Xbox, you're going to have all of these AAA IPs for $10 a month, which it makes so much more sense. Why wouldn't you, as a gamer, subscribe to that instead of buying a PlayStation? And so,
yeah. And again, Microsoft, I mean, that's going to benefit, their audience. But Microsoft's not doing it necessarily just to be like, we're a nice company. They're doing it because they want more people to subscribe to Game Pass. Yeah. It's a business decision, right? So, yeah, you may like it, but they're not doing it because they care so much about the audience. They're doing it because they want, this is all just like, I don't know. People have a weird relationship with companies. It's just like, at the end of the day, like you and I, we like Microsoft, but we also cover Microsoft. So we should, prefer it to say Mac OS or Linux. But like, we don't love Microsoft. Right. If I left this job tomorrow and I went into a different profession, I wouldn't be like, I don't know, like all obsessed with Microsoft still. I would move. I mean, I did. I have other careers and jobs before this, but people.
I think, we call out BS from Microsoft when BS is being done by Microsoft. The whole Bing Chat thing on Windows 11.
Jez's editorial I mentioned at the beginning is exactly that, right?
Yeah.
So,
like, we're not blind to sometimes, to BS that sometimes happens from Microsoft. But this is not one of those things. I don't think Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard is a negative thing for gamers. I think it's a negative thing for Sony. And so whatever Sony's doing here, really, people should be calling out their BS. And, Sony fans sort of aren't. They're like, yeah, Sony, you should fight for what you need, or this and the other. And I think it's ridiculous that is currently happening.
Definitely true. Let's talk about, you put up just an editorial before this podcast.
I did.
Which I encouraged you to write because this drives me a little bit batty. So our sister site, Tech Radar, great site, legends, been around for a very long time. Huh?
We're calling them out.
It's fine, because they're wrong on this. That's all. It's friendly. It's not like, but they said they.
To be fair, it's not just them that's wrong with this. I've seen a lot of wrong takes about
this
on the internet.
And that's why I wanted to write this, because even I had to respond to on some of your YouTube videos about this too. So their headline was Microsoft slowly but surely admits it was wrong about the Windows 11 taskbar. And then the subheadline is clues in the new preview build suggest that the never combine option may return. So they're just talking about stuff in the taskbar that's returning, quote unquote, back to Windows 11. And their position on this was that, well, Microsoft is basically admitting they were wrong about the design of Windows 11, specifically the taskbar, which is why they're bringing back these features. That's one way to look at it. It's the wrong way to look at it, though. And we've talked about this on the podcast, but people still aren't necessarily understanding the situation here. It's not that Microsoft went to Windows 11 with a brand new design and they put it out there like this, and they're like Apple, like, this is the way it is, and we're going to stick by it. And people like saw it and they're like, oh my God, you took away all this stuff, and revolted. Some of that is a little true in the sense that there were things missing in Windows 11. Absolutely. But the reason is not because they took them away because they didn't want them anymore. And this is the point I wanted Zach to drive home, and he can maybe explain it a little bit better. The taskbar in Windows 11 as the start menu is completely new. It's rewritten from the ground up with new code. And in doing so, you can't recreate everything that was in the previous taskbar technology for the last, 20 years in one fell swoop. Otherwise, Windows 11 would have been put off indefinitely for another year or two. And that wasn't
Yeah.
the point. So what they did was they released Windows 11 with the core functionality that most people
Right.
expect and use most of the time, with some of the more advanced features missing. And now they have to prioritize features. So what may be super important to you, your core, I use that all the time. You may have to look in a mirror and be like, on the other hand, I recognize, and not everybody finds that a super valuable function, or maybe even knows it exists. But they are now going through and have been going through and bringing back features, not because they were removed, but because they had to rebuild it from the ground up. And now they're recoding those features back into
Right.
the taskbar. That's a very different viewpoint than saying we were wrong. We're admitting we're wrong on stuff. No, they're just rebuilding it, but they're being, and you could talk about this too. Sorry, I mean, I don't want to steal the whole thunder here, but they're being a lot more conservative in
Right.
trying to be, I would say, minimalist in what they bring back. They don't want to recreate everything because they have telemetry and they probably know, hey, this feature almost no one uses, takes up memory, takes up storage, makes things more complex. Like, why would we put it back in? So they want to be smart about the things that they put in, so it's simplified. And everyone wants them to both have this streamlined, minimalist operating system that doesn't use a ton of resources, plus give me everything that's been in Windows for the last 40 years. And
Yeah.
you can. So I don't know, you can go off about this if you want.
Yeah, no, I think you basically nailed it. Basically, when Microsoft did Windows 11, they rebuilt the taskbar. The taskbar hadn't been touched. Well, the taskbar, every new version of Windows, the taskbar had been added to. It wasn't something that they continued. I
Yeah.
should say that's technically half true. Windows 7 was when the taskbar got a major update in 2009. And then it really was just they added to it with Windows 8, Windows 8.1, and Windows 10. And so, the taskbar on Windows 10 is, if you look at the default configuration of the Windows 10 taskbar, it is complex, it is packed, it is cramped, it's so overpacked with features and functions that lots of people don't use. And so with Windows 11, Microsoft took the opportunity to step back, analyze what the taskbar should and shouldn't be, and rebuild it from the ground up. They started that effort with Windows 10X, and that was essentially brought over to Windows 11. That's where that originates from. And that's why the version 1 of Windows 11 had the taskbar the way it was. They analyzed the data, they looked at what features people use in the taskbar the most, and prioritized those for version 1. And version 2, there'd be more additions re-added, version 3, so on and so forth. Now, obviously, as you mentioned, not everything will be added back. There will be features of the taskbar or previous versions of Windows that Microsoft looked at and deemed unnecessary for the future of Windows. Things like toolbars. Those aren't coming back. Taskbar toolbars are an old thing that nobody uses these days, so you won't see those return. The ability to move the taskbar to the top of the screen. Now, this is a big problem for a lot of power users, I think, but I think it's a small vocal minority. I would guess that if you looked at the statistics of the usage of Windows, the amount of people who have the taskbar at the top of the screen is in the single digits percentage. It's not a lot of people. So that's another weird thing that isn't seemingly not coming back. Microsoft is on record as saying that that's not something they're currently working on. But that's what's happening. They are rebuilding the taskbar of modern code. So it's wrong to say that Microsoft is admitting its mistake and reversing course, because that's not what's happening here. They always intended to slowly rebuild features that most people use. And that includes things like adding seconds to the system tray, clock, which is now available on Windows 11, being able to launch the task manager from the right-click menu. That's back on Windows 11. And we're also now seeing references to some other classic features, such as the ability to ungroup app icons and show taskbar labels. Those functionalities were available with Windows 7 through Windows 10, were removed in Windows 11, but they seemingly are working on bringing those back. And what that does is essentially restore how the taskbar worked in Windows Vista and prior days. It used to have app buttons on the taskbar were much longer. They were almost bar-shaped, and you could see the title of each app, and none of the apps were grouped. So you could open the same app window multiple times and have them in different positions on the taskbar if you wanted to. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you could used to be able to do that, and it does look like they're bringing that back. But at this point, it's been how long since Windows Vista? Well over 10 years. So I feel like people who are yearning for the ability to ungroup app icons are much older than us now. But Yeah, this is happening. They're slowly adding back this, that, and the other, but there won't be everything. It just won't be, because not all of it fits the product vision anymore. Microsoft wants the taskbar to be a simplistic interface for launching and pinning apps. That's really what it's for. And so all these other shortcuts and toolbars and whatever else it used to be able to do, it likely isn't going to return. And I'm okay with it. I actually do like the current version of the taskbar. I think it's very nice.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and power users important. They shouldn't be ignored. They tend to be the more vocal enthusiast crowd versus the regular person who's just using your laptop, like for web browsing and stuff like that. But they also have to recognize they're technically in the minority. So what is super important to them that is critical to their daily function, as you mentioned, could be in the single digit usage, in which case you as a company, you can't necessarily prioritize that when you have other things to do, right? There's other things they want to bring back. Some of those are new features too. They do have a vision for Windows 11, eventually Windows 12, building out for a modern system. And so they want to work on those, but they're going to bring back things that make sense and that people, they look at feedback, of course, when people really want a feature that will help them determine the prioritization of that, or at least inform them on that. But yeah, this is just a different way of looking at things. Like we said, there were definitely instances of, criticizing Microsoft. We did it just last week because there's, Zach wrote an editorial talking about the Bing chat implementation in Windows 11 was a nothing burger. It really wasn't much at all. And that was a fair criticism. We also said, though, to be fair to them, it's not like they could just build out a full chat UX experience in Windows 11 overnight. That's going to take a lot of planning, a lot of design, internal testing and debate, just like Bing itself had to go through. Then they're going to have to do the coding and get it out there, put it into the insider channels and get feedback. And so I imagine that process will take time. And what they did now was more just a quick advertising way and a quick way to link to it. And there was a related story that came out this week that basically said Microsoft already reversed course on the Bing chat thing. And if you recall, last Friday on the podcast, I lamented that on the new search for the taskbar, they put the new Bing logo and you would click it, then it would still just open the search, and then you would have another button to click to go to chat. I was like, oh, I missed the little daily cartoons that were down there, which you could turn off. You could switch a different design for that search bar if you don't want it, right? And then by Monday, the cartoon came back and I tweeted it out and I joked around. I'm like, oh, Microsoft must have listened because they brought back the cartoons. And every day there's been a new one. Yesterday was sleep. Today is what? Oh, discover Belize. And so it's got this cool little ocean cartoon there, and you click it, and it gives you the top story or top thing. And these are supposed to be like, they did one for, it was International Women's Day the other day, so they did something for that. They do it for holidays, and it's just a cool way to see something on your taskbar that looks kind of pleasant, and you click it, and then you can get more information about whatever it is, whatever day that's being celebrated worldwide or holiday or something like that. I think it's a clever thing. Like I said, optional. You could turn this off if you don't want it. But people took that as them reversing course. And then Microsoft came out and said, no, we always planned on keeping those cartoon design things there. We just, for the first few days, because it was a new feature, we kept the Bing icon there as well. And that could be the default cartoon. If they don't have one for that day, it'll just fall back to the Bing thing. But people interpret that as them already, quote unquote, reversing course, because people like Zach here, rightly criticized them, saying that this feature wasn't that much of a feature anyway. But again, people jump to conclusions, want to throw, because it is, you and I are both in this business. We know that writing a negative headline gets way more attention than writing a positive headline. That's just the way it is. So anytime you can kind of trash a company and be like, look at what these losers did, people are going to be like, yeah, they jump in on it. So I get it, but the assumptions that we make sometimes are not correct.
I will say that this would be helped if Microsoft were better at communication and just told us what the plan was for some of these things. Had when Windows 11 launched and Microsoft's been like, hey, so the taskbar's in this state here, but we do intend to add this, that, and the other back over the course of X, Y, Z. That would have been an easy way to solve this problem. Same goes with the Bing chat thing. If they launched, they launched it, or how they did, if they had just said in the same blog post, this icon will switch between Bing and other themes throughout the week. Sure, that would have solved that problem. And then even if they went further and said, this implementation is early, but we plan to build this out over the course of XYZ, that would have also solved the other problem I had with it. But because Microsoft thinks it's Apple, they just announce things with the terminology of, this is the thing. Here it is. We built this. Here you go. And so people assume that this is all they have planned for it. Maybe rightly so, because again, it's their terminology that they do announce features in this way. So that's why people assume that Microsoft is half-assed most of it.
It's true. Yeah, and this comes back to a thing I've talked about before in writing in general. Like I said, when I write like my reviews for laptops or something like that, back when we had comments, and I should say, by the way, comments are coming back to Windows Central. I don't have a specific ETA, but I will say that our forums are about to be redone, and they look gorgeous. They have a dark mode that looks phenomenal. So we're redoing the forums in terms of the technology that's behind it, the platform that's driving it. Then we're going to redo the categories and bring it all up together to make it more of our community again. Those will eventually be linked to our front page comment system, which I'm hoping comes back in the next few weeks / months. I don't have a specific ETA on that. I just know it's coming, and when I get more information, I'll definitely share it. But when we would have that community built in, now actually I forgot what I was going to say. Well,
feedback, context for news and announcements, people replying to articles.
Yeah. Wow, I just realized my brain went off the rails there. This was something I learned in cognitive science. I'm getting off a tangent here, but I'll come back to it. When you're thinking internally of concepts and things like that, but you're looking at text on the screen, even if you're not reading it, can still distract you enough because of just the way the brain works. And I'm really bad with that. Like if I'm looking at text, my brain goes numb. But what I was saying was, when I write a review or something like that, or an editorial, I judge how well I wrote it by looking at comments, because if in the comments, a lot of people are like, well, what about this? And what about that? Did you test for this? How come you didn't mention this? I screwed up the review because I didn't anticipate the things that people were actually interested in and wanting answers to. If I write a review and I get very few comments, at least ones that aren't critical of the review itself, not the product, then I know I did a good job. And I think Microsoft could benefit from this because they don't seem to understand how to anticipate what people are going to say or think about something when it comes out. And you're right, they could very easily just put like a sentence or two in saying like, we know this isn't done yet. That's why we have the insider channels. Come check it out. That's where we're testing these things and we give feedback, and we'll be bringing back some of these new features and we'll be testing them there. Like they could just literally say that and that'll be the end of the story.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. So yeah, as always, it comes down to Microsoft's inability to communicate with everyone.
They are getting better. For instance, I'll say the Bing blog is actually really well done. Like they're literally keeping they're keeping the Bing chat AI stuff very updated. Like every little move and change they make, they're telegraphing that, telling people, here it is, here's the news. Like they're being very transparent about it. And I hope they keep that up because I think that is the right role model. They're literally posting a changelog of the new Bing chat stuff every week, which I think is fantastic. Now, maybe in a couple of years when the stuff is all stabilized, they won't be doing that, of course. But as of now, as this thing is rolling out, I think they're doing a great job on communications there. But you're right, the Windows stuff could probably be better. The Insider channel does a good job with this, right? Brandon LeBlanc does a lot of the writing there. And I think their change logs are actually very good. They're very clear, and they break it down like the TLDR, what you need to know, like about the whole thing. Then they'll give you the whole list of all the changes and specifically what's new and what's fixed. Like they do a good job of that stuff. But then translating that to the major releases, you're right. Sometimes they want to keep things brief. But that's also kind of where we come into. But yeah,
Microsoft has this weird obsession of disguising development milestones and feature releases. For whatever reason, they just don't want to commit to a release of something in regards to Windows. Yeah. And I don't know why they're like this. I think it's because they have this philosophy where Windows is developed as a service, so there's never a point where we call it done. And that's the real problem. Because I just saw, I was talking about this earlier, the Xbox Insider program, they used the term release candidate today. So wow, I've not heard the term release candidate in regards to a technical Windows OS in ages. I'm really glad that they're still doing stuff like that. I would love it if Microsoft and the Insider program was more open in regards to development milestones, but they're just not. It's always just the next build of Windows, and it's like, oh, of Windows what? When is the next what is what? And we have to figure it out ourselves. But I guess that makes our job more fun.
It is still better than Apple.
No, but kind of, but not really as well, because the Apple beta program will tell you what the next version that you're testing is. It says 16.4
for iOS.
16.5. Yeah,
but not Mac OS.
I think it does. I think there's a version number in there. I think it does. Yeah.
No, I'm saying is like they don't really have an open development of like what's coming next to Mac OS. Right.
Yeah, not coming. They do have a program, but it is for developers, so you have to pay.
Yeah.
I think you have to pay $99 a year for it, actually. But but they are definitely more clear with what you're testing as a release. Like you're testing version XYZ, whereas Windows, the inside program is not that. They're like, here's Windows, have fun. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's true. Anywho, I think that does it for the podcast. We went pretty long on there because we're becoming the Windows Central AI podcast. Hopefully you found the discussion intriguing and interesting. What can we say? One, it was relatively a slow week, although we had a lot of good stuff up on the site. Two, AI is just it is the big story here. And look at it this way. It's replaced discussion of metaverse and you're hearing a lot less of crypto these days. I think that's a win-win personally, because the metaverse stuff, I think we were all talking about and being like, is this really going to go somewhere? Which also, I mean, quickly before we phase out, we should say Facebook has been kind of, I don't want to say reversing course. Not even Facebook, right? Meta, who they named their entire company after the metaverse. They slashed their prices on their headsets. They've cut the teams on the metaverse stuff, and they're now investing heavily into AI. Shocker. I know. Did you hear the story about how Facebook likes to see what other companies are doing, then directly copy them? They just did that with a verification system. So now Facebook is pivoting towards AI because that's what everybody's doing. But I will say AI is the real thing. I think it's the real deal. Where metaverse was always this like, someday we're going to be all in a metaverse. And it's just like, really? We're all going to strap headsets on? I don't know. Maybe someday. Maybe in my lifetime, we'll say. But we'll see. At least I think the AI stuff, though, is pretty cool. And it's fun to see it being developed so quickly and live as it happens. But we'll go to Q&A now with the audience for the live podcast. As we always mention, we do record this live Fridays, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time on our YouTube channel. You are free to join in the live chat there. We can ask us questions, and we'll try to answer them based on the things we talked about in the podcast or other things we didn't talk about. But other than that, you can follow me at Twitter at Daniel_Rubino, Rubino, and follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN. And you can ask us questions there. Tell us how good we're doing. Tell us how bad we're doing. Tell us what's wrong with the podcast. We were told recently that my audio was dropping in and out. We think we fixed that on this podcast. It was a Skype setting. So if it's better, you can thank Zach for fixing it. If it's not better, well, you can blame Zach for not fixing it. But there we go. We'll be back next week. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Take care, everyone.
Wicked. So yes, if you have any questions, now's the time to ask them. We'll hang around for a few more minutes and do our best to provide you with some answers.
Do you think the Surface Go 4 will have the Slim Pen charger in the keyboard? That's a good question.
That's a good question.
So the problem previously was that the Slim Pen was more expensive than the older round Surface Pen. I think that was also part of the case because they had an abundant supply of those round pens. And they need to keep them around because you have an older Surface, you would want to buy a replacement if you lost it. Have they been able to bring the technology down to a more basic level that's cost efficient to do that design, which I think is definitely preferable? I don't know. Hopefully, because I mean, the best design again, Surface Laptop Studio, that pen underneath the keyboard. Oh my God, it's so cool.
Yeah.
Just having that pen there.
Cool.
Like you just don't know it's there until you go to grab it. And it's just always there. I think it's, the Laptop Studio is just such a cool design. So underrated.
Yeah, no, I think you sort of nailed it there. It is the price of the Slim Pen is more than the old Surface Pen, so that's a problem for educational establishments who deploy Surface Go's, for example, right?
Yeah.
That said, there's no reason why it couldn't support both pens, and you could have the more expensive keyboard type cover with the charger. But then there's the problem with the Surface Go's type cover is already tiny, isn't it? So if
Yeah.
you added the charging dock at the top, you'd have to basically move the keyboard down maybe a couple not inches, but a couple millimeters, which would make the trackpads even smaller. So you would have to ideally change the shape of the product, the tablet, to accommodate for that, which I guess technically they could do. But who knows if they will do that. But yeah, I don't know. It's
not clear cut.
Yeah. Is Surface Go 4 ARM only for consumers? I don't know. I would assume that there will be an Intel version. I'd be very shocked if it's ARM only. It would be a big, bold move for them, and it would be commendable. But I do think for enterprise customers, there will still be probably a Core i3 model that you can configure. Whether or not it's available on the consumer store, if it's only in the business store, who knows? But I think you'll be able to buy an Intel version still. Since the server builds are now part of the Canary channel, will they get more frequent builds like the client, or will they continue to release builds every few weeks or months to months as a status quo? I don't know. Unsurprisingly, I don't really follow Windows Server development too much. I think, honestly, the movement on Windows Server is just slower in general, isn't it? There's not much innovation you can do on server, I don't think. I could be wrong about that. Again, I'm not really... I don't follow server that closely. I think they release builds whenever they deem enough has changed in the platform to warrant testing new code, right? Otherwise, they would do it more frequently if they had breaking changes that they needed testing. It's because new versions of Windows Server don't release that often, right? I think they're every 3 years or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah.
To this day, I think the latest Surfaces that work with the Slim Pen support every pen except for the very first one, which was not entering. Yeah, you're right. They do, so you can do input. I just meant storage wise. Like you could have because the magnets on the pen, the Surface Go, they could still be there.
Yeah, you can't stick the round pen to like a Surface Pro 9.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah,
you can't stick the Slim Pen onto the Go here because it'll fall off because the magnets aren't aligned properly.
Go already has enough flack from reviewers for having a small keyboard. I don't see where they could fit a pen cradle in it. So that kind of like begs the question, right? Or forces the question. Maybe, and I don't know, Zach may speak to this. Is there a major design revision coming to Surface Go?
I don't think so. I think the design will roughly be the same, and it's just the processor on the inside that's changing. Because you have to remember, it's a budget line. It's not pushing innovation. It's not breaking any boundaries.
Right, but maybe they could make it either a little bit bigger, or make the bezels a little bit smaller, or do something where.
If they made the bezels smaller, they'd have to either increase the size of the. Well, no, they'd have to increase the size of the screen because there's no way you're making that keyboard smaller. It's just not happening. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think so. I think it's still 10.5 inches. So I'm not expecting huge changes.
Thank you, Cameron, for being a supporter tier. And Igor SL for donating money to the channel. Always appreciated. Do you have any news about desktop processors that can run Windows Studio effects? Oh, that's a good question.
There are none currently, I believe. Unless AMD has some.
Yeah, because I'm running an Intel 13th gen i9. So basically the best consumer processor you can get, and I don't have studio effects. Yet you do get them with ARM chips and with some of the AMD stuff as well. But I don't think these have like a dedicated AI chip on them, the NPU. Maybe we'll see that. I'm sure we'll probably see that with 14th gen. But it's interesting. I will say that with desktop, don't forget, you can use, I would prefer, if you're already on desktop and you can go with an RTX GPU, then you can use NVIDIA Broadcast, which is what I use. If you're wondering what's blurring my background, that's NVIDIA Broadcast. You can also use it for audio. And of course, I can use the creepy eye thing to center my eyes. And I think it does a really good job. The eye thing is probably not as good as Microsoft's solution, which is a little bit less creepy, but it's improving, right? So on desktop, you do have that option right now. So if you're using something with an RTX graphics card, either 30 or 40 series, NVIDIA Broadcast is a free download. You can just go get it, and you can do basically all the same stuff, arguably superior as well. And you'll just be using the GPU, which is better than using a CPU. So
I wonder what bump in processor power the new Go will have. Well, if we assume it's a Snapdragon 7C chip, what Gen 7C are we at right now? Is it Gen 2?
what was
Gen
it?
1?
Oh, yeah, I believe. Yeah, I don't know. Did they do a Gen 3? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I would assume it's probably more. So you got to remember, because emulation adds another layer of performance concern. Because if you're emulating an app, then yes, it will probably run slower than the native Intel version on the Surface Go 2, for example, Go 3. But a native ARM app compared to an Intel Pentium device, I think they're probably on par, right? I can't imagine the ARM version is running slower than an Intel Pentium running natively compiled ARM apps. We're on 7C plus Gen 3. I don't think it will get a 7C plus unless the plus is just the 7C now. I think it would be standard, bog standard 7C.
Yeah, 7C plus Gen 3. Yeah, I mean, they could, who knows too, right? I mean, I guess that's out now. But they'll probably do a kind of a custom version or something like that, maybe. I don't know.
It also comes down to pricing, right? Because if they can't get the pricing, because that $399 starting price, I think they might be more willing to bump that to maybe $449 now that inflation is up. I don't know, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with the Go.
Rohan asks, I currently have a Surface Pro 7 Plus LTE for business. That's a cool device, by the way. I still have that around. I would like something that has 32 gigs of RAM and still retain LTE 5G. What do you think about the Lenovo X1 Yoga Gen 7? Or is there something better? Two options. I think that Lenovo X1 Yoga, great laptop. Depends if you're okay with their track point, the red nub thing, and the sacrifice you have to have with the touchpad. You lose a little bit of spacing, but it's a great device, amazing keyboard, and they keep getting better with every generation in terms of like their cameras and audio. The other option I would try, and I still haven't reviewed it, is the HP Dragonfly Folio, which is also, I think, the best 2-in-1 design that has 5G LTE, and I'm pretty sure you can get up to 32 gigs of RAM in there as well. I think that's kind of a cooler device personally. And if you're coming from a Pro 7 Plus, I think that form factor makes a little bit more sense. So yeah. And that has a real, like a Core i7 processor, and it's not ARM.
Did we ever review the Galaxy Book Go with the Snapdragon 7C in it?
Yes.
Oh, we did. So we did benchmark that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking on Samsung's website that it's not for sale. So
no, yeah, it's gone. Yeah.
Oh, that's a shame.
I don't think the ARM stuff does well. It's just not there yet.
Has Apple M1, M2 chips increased their laptop / Mac market share versus Windows and their OEM partners? I think it has. I think they have been slowly climbing, but Mac's been slowly climbing for the better part of 20 years. They've always had a very steady incline, and none of the innovation that they've done in recent years has improved that incline. I don't think. They're still just slowly climbing.
Rohan says, I just worry about the 28-watt processor in the X1 Yoga. I've heard the 12 gens are overheating. Two things there. The 12 gens don't have to overheat. In fact, most of them don't. It really depends on the thermal solution. That said, even when we did review the X1 Yoga, we did point out that the thermal solution in there wasn't great for it. That might have improved with some BIOS updates and stuff like that, and the way they do things. I personally think for a lot of people, the P series processors can be a little too much for some of these devices. I believe the Dragonfly Folio is a U series. I forgot though, but it's a powerful device. Like it runs really well. So again, I think that's another favor for the Dragonfly Folio.
What's the possibility that if the Go 4 is ARM, that they redesign the body to be thinner without vents like the Pro X? I think the problem with making it thinner is that it reduces how much battery they can fit in it.
Yeah.
I don't have any complaints with the current thinness of the Surface Go. I think it's perfectly thin enough.
Does it Go? The Go doesn't even have vents, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have vents. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I actually think this is probably the best 10-inch Surface ever. I know they didn't make many of them, but the design of it, I really love this thing. The Surface Go has always held a special place in my heart, and I don't think the design needs to change. The only thing that I really want them to add is rounded corners on the display. I like the rounded corners on the Laptop Studio and the Laptop Go, and I think it would be a real nice addition on the Surface Go as well.
Yeah, the the randomness of curved corners on displays in the PC world is very random.
It's crazy. Yeah.
There's no rhyme or reason. We don't know if that's an encouraged design choice or what's going on there. Even Surface is not consistent with it, so I don't know.
Did any of you guys
hopefully SQ3 hopefully SQ3 will change consumer sentiment. I'm gonna go with no. I don't think
maybe
it will.
SQ4.
Yeah, if they do an SQ4, obviously they probably will, because we know that the next gen chip that they're working on is supposed to be a different class.
Yeah. It's the M2/M3 competitor that the PC world has, in theory, been waiting for.
Anything in the world of Surface Duo? That's a question for Zach.
No, sadly not. I doubt we will hear anything more about Duo for a while, since things are so far out. And we'll probably maybe talk a bit more about software features, assuming that those still are on the cards. But regarding hardware, I'm probably not going to talk about anything else for a long time because we're very far away from anything shipping. So we'll see in a few months if anything has changed. Will we see a return of AMD custom silicon with Surface? I feel like AMD is kind of dead lately from Surface laptops. Yeah, I have no idea why they didn't ship the Laptop 5 without AMD, because they definitely had them built. They definitely prototyped it. They had 6000 series laptops ready to go, and they just didn't launch. Now we know we know Microsoft and AMD still have a relationship. Panos and the CEO of AMD have been in many photos together since the Laptop 5 were announced. I say many, maybe it was one or two, but they've met since, so we know that they're still talking, and there must still be a plan for AMD and Surface. I assume maybe the Surface Laptop 6 will have AMD again. But yeah, other than that, I have no idea.
Great podcast as ever. Thank you. What happened to Outlook Monarch? It's in the Microsoft Store. We didn't do an article on that, but it came out in the store a little while ago. In fact, if you downloaded it through our link, which came through a Microsoft site, it automatically eventually handed off to the store. And so it can get updated to the store now too. But yeah, you can go to the Microsoft Store, just type in Outlook Beta, I believe it's under, and download it. So that's the new the new basically WebView 2 version of Outlook. I've been using it on all my devices. It's pretty fantastic. What's cool about it too is every once in a while the icon, if you have it on your taskbar, will have like a little up arrow, and it's because they can update it on the fly. You just need to close it and restart it, and they just make little minor changes to the backend code that will appear. It doesn't give you a change log or anything like that, but they really do update it. Like sometimes I notice like once or twice a day, it'll just be like an arrow. I'm like, okay, I guess there's an update. You don't need to update it, but it only takes a second anyway. But I don't know, Zach maybe knows the ETA on it, but they're still refining it. It just came out basically the same thing, I believe, just came out for Mac OS. It's in their store now as well. And so you can get it there. But I think
Yeah,
it's
I don't know what the
awesome.
ETA is, but if you are using the built-in Mail app now, for lots of people, there's a toggle in the top right where it will allow you to switch to the new Monarch client. So it's definitely coming along, and it will eventually replace it. But yeah, I don't know what the ETA is for that. It was supposed to be done by like last year, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it's not done yet. Do you think that Microsoft might be capable and want to ship Canary builds without some select Windows Core OS features built in that you've mentioned might be incoming to keep some secrets? I mean, Microsoft is certainly capable of shipping builds without stuff checked in the code. Yeah, for sure. The question, what we're really asking here is what kind of Windows Core OS platform enhancements can they ship on legacy desktop? Because they can't do all of it. They just can't. And that's the question that we're still trying to figure out. Like, what will ship as part of the next version of Windows that makes it more like Windows Core OS? State separation is one that comes to mind, but can Microsoft build an upgrade path from a non-separated version of Windows, a non-state separated version of Windows, to a version that is state separated? Can they do that? I don't know. I would guess no, because that's probably quite complicated. You can certainly install legacy Windows as a state separated OS, but I don't think you can upgrade from a non-state separated to state separated while maintaining data and settings and this, that, and the other. So that stuff is the sort of thing that I don't think they can test. But what about maybe sandboxing? They could probably test sandboxing if they wanted to. That's a pretty boring feature. Sandboxing to a certain level, of course, not the whole state separated thing. But yeah, I don't know. I genuinely don't know how they're going to do it. And also, the vision for Windows Core OS, although it's not dead, much of it is still technically a separate product. They can't replace Windows Desktop with Windows Core OS. That was never the case before. It isn't the case now. So there's a lot of moving parts going on there. I promise I will get an article out about this at some point soon in regards to sort of Next Valley and platform enhancements and Core OS and how this is all coming together. But yeah, that's basically all I can say on the subject for now.
Cameron mentions, have we seen the solid state cooling video? Yeah, I did see that, the air jet stuff. I don't know if they're going to use it in Surface. They may, but I don't know much about that technology in terms of how close it is to being rolled out. You do mention it's supposed to come this year, maybe, with this technology. I guess we'll see. But for those who don't know, it's a way of cooling a device without fans. And yeah, it's a very thin, it looks like almost like what the old modems used to look like, a little metal card. And it has like basically like a heat sink. And then it uses a way of vibrating that causes the air to get sucked in and acts as a convection and then shoots out the other end, but doesn't have like really any moving parts to it, which in turn would save a lot of battery, not to mention noise. Yeah, it's pretty cool. We'll try to do an article on it. It's a very long video. It was done by PC World, and I think it's like almost 30 minutes long. So it's a little hard to summarize. I guess we can use Bing Chat to cheat and have it summarize their article or video for them. I wonder if that's what, maybe ChatGPT will be, the GPT-4 might do, is be able to summarize videos, because that would be cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very useful there.
I wonder if OG Duo will get Android 13. I don't remember if they promised 3 OS upgrades or 3 years of upgrades. I believe it was 3 years of upgrades. But you have to remember that they would have likely started development on the next version of Android now, and that they've still got until basically September, October of this year was Duo support. So it's most likely the Duo will slip under the radar and still get that last version. I'd be very surprised if the OG Duo ends on Android 12L. I'll say that. All right.
One more was any chance of any changes to the hinge design, the laptop studio you're aware of? No. I mean, I don't know why there would be. I have no issues with the hinge.
I guess the only addition I would like is for that middle hinge that allows the screen to lay forward to be a hinge that I can actually position at any angle, rather than it being essentially a floppy hinge. That's the only addition I'd ask.
Got it. Yeah,
but that's it.
Yeah, that'd be kind of.
But
interesting.
I don't know if they're working on that or anything. So
I will say, and this is a story that it's a non-story, which is a good story, which is we haven't had to do any articles about issues with Laptop Studio
That's a good
in terms
point.
of quality control.
Yeah,
Because if you remember, Surface Book had a lot of issues with that
they did.
detachable screen.
Yeah.
Not to mention the time Zach convinced me to try to swap them out between Book 3, the Gen 3 and the Gen 2, and I couldn't
Why
remove
didn't it work? It should just work.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, as far as I know, like I'm sure there's occasional quality controls issue, but we haven't seen anything in terms of things failing. It just like they really kind of nailed that device. And that's another reason, like I said, it just doesn't get the attention because it's like it's been fine. Like that's many people aren't going to write a story like, hey, this thing is working as it should. But it's kind of true. And it's Surface has had a little rough history with new form factors being having things wrong with it that they need to modify. So,
Yeah. All right. With that, I think it's time to say goodbye.
Yep.
Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We'll be back next Friday. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we shall see you next time. Bye.